Chapter 1708. Xiaohua's mind came out of the space, and his eyes were filled with anticipation. When he thought about how Fan Tong had controlled the mighty power centipede to attack him, his heart burned with passion. This is a spirit beast. If I can control it freely, it'll be like having an extra helper. However, this mighty power centipede is different from Little Yellow and Little Silver. I can't control it myself, but if I rely on Little Silver to control it, there'll be another obstacle. It seems that I have to find a way to control it. While he was thinking, Xiaohua took out the book from the spirit husbandry sect. In the past, his cultivation was weak and he only wanted to find cultivation methods and pills that could increase his cultivation. He didn't care about the insect scripture or the spirit beasts. Later on, he focused on cultivation and put his energy on Dharma treasures, so he didn't think about these things. Only now did he remember the insect scripture that he had long forgotten. And as expected, the spirit husbandry sect's jade slip doesn't have any cultivation methods, but there are methods to raise and control spirit beasts. The insect scripture naturally talked about spirit insects and how to raise them. There was a general introduction to all kinds of spirit insects. Unfortunately, Xiaohua wasn't interested in this and only looked at it briefly before flipping to the back. It's here. When he flipped to the end of the insect scripture, Xiaohua saw a few pages of methods to control spirit insects. Then, Xiaohua didn't hesitate and carefully comprehended it word by word. After an unknown amount of time, Xiaohua put away the insect scripture and closed his eyes. Then, as if he thought of something, he waved his hand and another small book came out of the space. It was the one Ling Jingyi gave to Xiaohua, along with the magic treasure that could subdue the fire ape. Xiaohua didn't dare to take it out casually before, for fear that Ling Jingyi had done something to it. Now that he thought about controlling spirit insects, he naturally thought of this book. Unfortunately, this book only recorded the method to refine the magic treasure Shadow Moon. It didn't say anything about how to control spirit beasts. Shadow Moon is so important to Flying Phoenix Ridge, and it's passed down from their ancestors. After refining it, I should be able to obtain the method to subdue the fire ape. Xiaohua kept the booklet and thought to himself, now, this young master's cultivation should be comparable to Ling Jingyi and Pu Jianyuan. However, since the two of them are unable to subdue the fire ape, this young master should not be anxious. Then, Xiaohua closed his eyes and pondered hard. His hands would form some mysterious seals from time to time, stirring the world spirit energy in the room. After a long time, Xiaohua opened his eyes and waved his hand, taking the godly power centipede out of the space. The godly power centipede suddenly appeared in the middle of the room. It was very surprised and looked a bit impatient. It twisted its body a few times and flew in a certain direction. Xiaohua seemed to have a card up his sleeve. He opened his left hand slightly and grabbed at the air. The divine power centipede immediately stopped in midair. As if it had sensed danger, the Herculean centipede struggled with all its might. Its pitch-black body glowed with a faint golden color. This Herculean centipede is indeed powerful. Seeing that the Herculean centipede was still able to move under his magic power, Xiaohua couldn't help but be astonished. Then, his face revealed a happy expression. The seals in his right hand were quickly formed. Zhi. Different seals struck the Herculean centipede's body. The Herculean centipede struggled even more fiercely. The more it struggled, the more magic power surged out from Xiaohua's left hand. After the time it took to eat a meal, the Herculean centipede stopped struggling. It had a dejected look as it floated in midair. Damn it, subduing a spiritual insect is actually so difficult? Xiaohua sighed. If this young master didn't have so much magic power, this little thing would have really flown away. Then he withdrew his left hand. Both his hands formed seals and attacked the Herculean centipede. After several seals, an illusory image emerged from the Herculean centipede's body. Xiaohua knew that this was the Herculean centipede's soul essence. When the soul essence left the body, Xiaohua was very cautious as he formed the last seal. He pressed his thumb between his eyebrows. Then he shouted, "Quick!" He pressed his hand down. That thumb was pressing on the Herculean centipede's soul essence. The Herculean centipede seemed to be burned by fire. It struggled painfully and rolled back and forth in midair. However, the strange thing was that the Herculean centipede's soul essence didn't move at all under Xiaohua's thumb. "Withdraw!" Xiaohua chanted again. The trace of the primordial spirit in his hand was smeared on the Herculean centipede's soul essence. In an instant, Xiaohua felt as if he was the Herculean centipede and the Herculean centipede was him. A burning sensation came from the depths of his soul. Hiss! Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air and hurriedly withdrew his hand. The Herculean centipede immediately stopped rolling. The soul essence was immediately absorbed into the Herculean centipede's body. At the same time, the pain Xiaohua felt immediately disappeared. Damn it, no wonder I can't take in too many spiritual insects. Xiaohua smiled bitterly and absorbed the exhausted Herculean centipede into his space. The last bit of pain is indeed short, but it's enough to cause damage to a cultivator's primordial spirit. Subduing such a small Herculean centipede took so much effort. What about subduing a fire ape? It'll be even more difficult. Oh, right, I wonder if there's any record of the Herculean centipede in the insect scripture? Xiaohua thought of the insect scripture. Spirit husbandry sex insect scripture mostly recorded spiritual insects. After flipping through it, there was indeed a record of the Herculean centipede. However, there weren't many records. Herculean centipede, strong, feeds on spiritual stones. Earth's spiritual stones are the best. Ranked 87th. After that, there was nothing else. Ranked 87th? Xiaohua was slightly stunned and thought to himself, such a powerful Herculean centipede is only ranked 87th? Then, which spiritual insect is ranked first? Xiaohua hurriedly flipped to the front. Dream mirage butterfly, born to create illusions, feeds on all kinds of mirage spirits. Ranked first. Spirit devouring insect, swallows all kinds of spiritual insects, eats everything. Ranked second. Water pattern butterfly, controls water-type spiritual energy, lives together with rainbow epiphyllum. Ranked 42nd. Feiqing, controls earth-type spiritual energy, is fast, counters ice worm. Ranked 50th. Ice worm, controls water-type spiritual energy, lives in groups. Ranked 56th. Damn it, I thought ice worm and water pattern butterfly were some amazing spiritual insects, but their rankings are actually so low? Herculean centipede is also ranked 87th. Damn it, I wonder how powerful the dream mirage butterfly and spirit devouring insect that are ranked second are. After Xiaohua saw it, he couldn't help but be shocked. However, why aren't there any fire apes and spirit-seeking mice? And even sky-shaking beast isn't there? Chapter 1709. The spirit-seeking mouse and heaven-shaking mouse are not in this insect scriptures. Furthermore, the god power centipede is so powerful, but it is only ranked 87th. That Feiqing who is ranked 50th, wasn't it easy for me to kill him that day? I can't see how powerful it is. This insect scripture? I'm afraid it can't be real. Xiaohua thought and put the insect scripture into his space. Actually, it wasn't Xiaohua's idea. Since the spirit husbandry sect could record the insect scripture, there must be a basis for it. Although the god power centipede was strong, in a fight between cultivators, magic power was the most important. If the god power centipede didn't have great strength, it would be useless to use force to break through spells. Feiqing's speed was extremely fast, and it was much more useful than the god power centipede in a fight between cultivators. At this moment, the restriction in Xiaohua's house shook. Hee, I think senior brother Qian is looking for me. Xiaohua jumped down from the cloud bed. Seeing that there were no loopholes in the house, he took out a magic tablet and removed the restriction. As expected, it was Qian Diheng outside the house. Seeing Xiaohua open the door, he smiled. Junior brother Xiao, I have completed my task. As he spoke, he entered the house and scanned with his spiritual sense. With a slap of his hand, he took out a three-pronged fork that was 1 foot long from his storage bag. At the tip of the three-pronged fork, there were 3 sharp points that faintly flashed with different lights. Within the lights, there were thin runes flowing. What do you think of my halberd? Qian Diheng waved it flauntingly. As he slightly channeled his magic power, the 3 points of the fork gradually flashed with light. As the runes flowed, they absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the house. Gradually, 3 balls of light of different colors flashed at the 3 points of the fork. Senior brother Qian's magic weapon is a little strange. Xiao Hua scanned with his spiritual sense and said in shock, other people's magic weapons have only one element, but yours actually has 3 different elements: metal, wood, and water. Of course, the way of attack is different, but the power seems to be much weaker, right? Hee, junior brother Xiao, you don't have to worry about this. Qian Diheng waved his hand and put away the magic tool. He stroked it with his hand as if it was a treasure and said, the power of this magic tool will absolutely not decrease because of the attacks of 3 attributes. I won't tell you the details. You only need to know that I spent a large amount of spirit stones to refine 3 different types of magic tools into an even more powerful magic tool. 3 different magic tools? Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. Hee, don't worry, junior brother Xiao. How can the place I recommend be wrong? Qian Diheng said complacently, this workshop is the most mysterious place in the Weeping Moon City. Think about it, to be able to forge 3 kinds of magic tools together without weakening their offensive power, what kind of cultivation base does that artificer have? TSK, even if he's not in the late stage of foundation establishment, he's at least in the gold core stage. Don't worry and go. Xiao Hua rubbed his nose with his hand and said with a wry smile, but I'm afraid there's also a lot of spirit stones, right? Of course, asking a gold core stage tool refiner to help, the price is naturally high. Qian Diheng smiles and whispers a number to Xiao Hua. When Xiao Hua heard this, his face immediately turned green. So it's almost the same as bidding for 1 or 2 magic tools. How can it be the same? Qian Diheng obviously didn't care about the number of spirit stones. He waved his hand and said, this was modified by a tool refiner according to my request and also refined according to my cultivation base. It can't be compared with ordinary magic tools that can be bought through bidding. Moreover, junior brother Xiao also knows that I only have 1 defensive magic tool. Although I'm not afraid of life-threatening situations in many cases, it can't be used to always be attacked by others. I can't get the same cloud suppressing seal as you, but getting a powerful magic tool is still possible. Xiao Hua nodded, senior brother Qian, you sent those 3 magic tools over. Did you only get them today? Exactly 10 days. Qian Diheng patted Xiao Hua's shoulder and said, junior brother Xiao, don't blame me for wasting time. You also know the reason. When I get this halberd, I'll be relieved. No matter. I know. Xiao Hua's magic tools were of unknown origin, so he naturally understood Qian Diheng. How about this, I still have some spirit stones left. If junior brother Xiao doesn't have enough spirit stones, I'll lend them to you first. Qian Diheng rolled his eyes and said with a smile. Forget it. Xiao Hua knew that he lacked a lot of spirit stones. Qian Diheng's spirit stones were just a drop in the bucket. Senior brother Qian, just tell me the location. Okay. Qian Diheng smiled and whispered, telling him the location of the workshop. Then, he patted and handed a triangular magic tablet to Xiao Hua. This magic tablet is the certificate to enter the workshop. Without it, the workshop won't accept you. Xiao Hua scanned the magic tablet with his divine sense. There was a strange fluctuation of spiritual power on it. Obviously, it was a special magic tablet. He reached out and took it. It was cold to the touch, and he didn't know what material it was made of. Go quickly, junior brother Xiao. If you want to refine your cloud-suppressing seal, I'm afraid it will take a long time. You should calculate our schedule. Qian Diheng said meaningfully. Okay, junior brother understands. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and sent Qian Diheng out. He followed him out and saw that Qian Diheng entered the house and activated the restriction. Then he saw that Sun Shu and Kun Fian's houses were also protected by restriction. He knew that the two were also working hard in their houses. Xiao Hua sat in the spirit camel carriage and arrived at the place Qian Diheng mentioned. He paid the spirit stones and looked around. This place was actually very lively. It was different from what he imagined. Hidden in the city. That's right. Xiaohua squinted his eyes and glanced at the lively workshop 3 zhang away. Then he looked at a tea house on his left. Then, Xiaohua walked to a secluded place and changed his appearance and height. Then he put on camouflage clothes and walked slowly to the tea house. There were many cultivators in the tea house. There were all kinds of cultivators, but different cultivators gathered in different circles. Those with low cultivations were far from those with high cultivations. "Senior, what kind of spirit tea do you want to drink?" A boy around the second layer of qi, refining hurriedly greeted him with a smile. "Anything." Xiaohua looked at the stairs not far away and said with a smile, "Can I go upstairs?" Upstairs is the place where Foundation Establishment seniors drink tea. If senior is a Foundation Establishment cultivator, you can naturally go up. The boy said with a smile. Foundation Establishment? When Xiaohua heard this, he didn't say anything and walked up the stairs. He was wearing camouflage clothes now. Who could see his cultivation? Naturally, he wasn't afraid. Sure enough, when he went up the stairs, other than Foundation Establishment cultivators, there were also a few cultivators wearing camouflage clothes like him. However, these cultivators were all alone. There were some spirit fruits and spirit tea in front of them, and they were enjoying it alone. Xiaohua found a place near the street and waited for the boy to bring him some spirit tea and a plate of spirit fruits. Xiaohua slowly tasted them. His gaze wandered around the street. There were many cultivators going in and out of the workshop. Most of them were qi refining cultivators. Occasionally, there were also Foundation Establishment cultivators. Of course, there were also some cultivators wearing camouflage clothes. Their cultivation couldn't be seen. There shouldn't be anything unusual. Xiaohua slowly finished drinking a pot of spirit tea and stood up to leave. At this time, a voice transmitted to him. "Fellow Taoist, are you here to participate in the secret auction?" Secret auction? Xiaohua was slightly stunned. He turned around and saw a cultivator wearing camouflage clothes facing him. "Fellow Taoist, don't panic. I heard that there's a secret auction here. I want to exchange something inside, but I don't have a command talisman. Therefore, I can only wait here. To tell you the truth, I just asked all the Foundation Establishment fellow Taoists in this tea house. None of them are here to participate." Xiaohua stopped and said promptly, "If fellow Taoist has a command talisman, I am willing to pay a high price for it." "I'm sorry, fellow Taoist. I just came here to drink tea and buy some magic tools in the workshop below. I've never heard of any secret auction. If fellow Taoist wants something good, can't the auction in Weeping Moon City work?" Xiaohua naturally refused. "Oh, I'm sorry to disturb fellow Taoist." That cultivator's tone was filled with indescribable disappointment. However, when he saw Xiaohua's figure disappear inside the workshop, he looked at the other Foundation Establishment cultivators. "Senior, do you want to buy magic tools or materials for refining?" As soon as Xiaohua entered the workshop, a 5th-layer tool refining cultivator came to greet him. He directly ignored Xiaohua's camouflage clothes and said very respectfully. Xiaohua raised his eyes and looked inside. This crafty workshop was extremely large, and there were also a lot of people inside. All kinds of refining materials were placed in different places. Just like the cultivator in front of him who was welcoming guests, there were at least 10 of them. Yes, they're both refining shops in Weeping Moon City. This workshop is 100 times better than Luanji's shop. Xiaohua muttered to himself. However, when he casually asked about the price of a commonly used refining material, he curled his lips. Although the materials of this workshop were good, the price was more than 30% higher than Luanji's shop. Forget it. Xiaohua lost interest in continuing his act. He clapped his hands and took out the triangular magic tablet. He said in a low voice, "I have something to trouble Xiao workshop with." That cultivator's gaze fell on the magic tablet and he was slightly startled. Then he immediately said respectfully, "Senior, please put away the magic tablet. Junior will ask the assistant shopkeeper to come over." After saying that, that cultivator quickly left. Not long after, a thin early-stage foundation establishment cultivator with a black mole on the left side of his face walked over. He cupped his hands and said, "I, Xia Ming, greet fellow Taoist." "Hee, fellow Taoist Xia." Xiao Hua saw that Xia Ming didn't ask for his name and didn't answer. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, this way please." Xia Ming raised his hand and led Xiao Hua to a corner of the entrance hall. They followed a staircase to the second floor. There were clearly few people on the second floor. There were only a dozen or so foundation establishment cultivators accompanied by female cultivators who were welcoming guests. They lowered their heads and looked at the many magic tools on the table. Chapter 1710. Hearing that someone was going upstairs, the foundation building cultivators only slightly raised their heads and glanced around. When they saw that it was Xiao Hua in a camouflage robe, they frowned and looked down again. "Fellow Taoist, please come this way." Xia Ming led Xiao Hua to the end of the second floor. He formed hand seals and a small door as tall as a person appeared on the wall. Then he went in first. Xiao Hua's figure paused for a moment, then he also went in. Behind the small door was an empty hut with no decorations. "Fellow Taoist, please take out your magic card for inspection." Xia Ming slapped his hand and took out a small box from his storage bag. It was emitting a milky white light. Xiao Hua handed over the triangular magic card. Xia Ming also looked at it carefully and threw it into the box. As the magic card was thrown in, the color of the box gradually changed. Soon, it turned into an orange-red color. "Quick!" Xia Ming's left hand formed hand seals again and hit the box. With a tang sound, an orange-red beam of light shot out from the box and hit the roof above Xia Ming's head. With a whoosh sound, as Xiao Hua's gaze moved up, there was a ripple of light above his head and a small triangular door appeared. Xia Ming nodded and didn't return the magic card to Xiao Hua. He pointed with his hand and said with a smile, "Yes, fellow Taoist, your magic card is correct. Please go in." "Thank you, fellow Taoist." Seeing this, Xiao Hua flew into the triangular door above his head. When Xiao Hua landed in the pavilion on the third floor, he looked around. This was a slightly dark triangular space. There were no decorations inside this space, just like the small room from before. On the four walls of this space, there were only a few bright flower stones. "Fellow Taoist, please." While Xiao Hua was still sizing it up, there was a slight distortion in the air in front of him. A flat human figure seemed to be squeezed out from a crack, gradually revealing itself. When the entire figure went from flat to full, it was actually a cultivator wearing a camouflage robe. He couldn't see his specific cultivation. Xiao Hua didn't dare to neglect and quickly saluted, "Greetings, fellow Taoist." "Yes, my surname is Bai. How should I address you, fellow Taoist?" The cultivator's tone was very indifferent. "My surname is Huang," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "All right, fellow Taoist Huang." The cultivator calmly said as if it was a routine matter, "Since fellow Taoist has a spell card from my workshop, then you must have been introduced by a fellow Taoist from my workshop. Of course, my workshop won't trace your origin. May I ask if fellow Taoist Huang needs any help from my workshop?" Xiao Hua was still preparing his words, but when he saw the cultivator being so straightforward, he was unexpectedly stunned. Then he suddenly understood. That's right. If the craftsman were so wishy-washy, who would dare to refine a magic tool of unknown origin? After pondering for a moment, Xiao Hua took out the four-phase wheel and the spear-shaped magic tool from the space and handed them over. He said with a smile, "I have two magic tools. I need Xiao Workshop to change their appearance." The cultivator took the Dharma artifacts and looked at them. Then he scanned them with his strong divine will and carefully observed the two Dharma artifacts. This divine sense, I'm afraid if it's not at the early stage of the Golden Core realm, it's at least at the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. Xiao Hua also tried. The strand of divine will he left on the Dharma artifacts was immediately expelled. This caused Xiao Hua to be scared witless and didn't dare to do anything else. The cultivator didn't pay attention to Xiao Hua. After a while, he whispered, Fellow Taoist Huang, these two magic tools, to be honest, the refinement is really not good. Especially this spear-shaped magic tool. Aside from its special material, the formation inside is really clumsy. Wait a moment. Speaking up to here, the cultivator's tone was a bit strange. After carefully observing for a moment, he nodded and said, I made a mistake just now. The material of this magic tool is not only special but also rare. It is a bit similar to the corpse of a demonic beast that I just killed. Unfortunately, it is still a bit lacking. When Xiaohua heard the cultivator's unclear words, he was also at a loss. However, he didn't dare to blindly ask and only listened quietly. Then, the cultivator took out the 4 symbols wheel and said, This magic tool. Although it can mobilize the 4 kinds of spiritual qi of heaven and earth, it is a pity that the formation is crude and the magic power it can use is too little. If you want to change it, it would be better to directly refine it. Xiaohua's heart was moved and he whispered, Senior, how many spirit stones do you need to refine these 2 magic tools again? Not much. The cultivator didn't even think and reported a number. Still not much. Xiaohua was secretly shocked. Soon after, he smiled apologetically and said, Junior doesn't have enough spirit stones. Oh no. Is it possible to use spirit grass and other things? Yes, of course. The cultivator casually said, aside from spirit stones, magic tools and magic treasures can all be used as spirit stones. Xiao paused for a moment, then raised the spear-shaped magic tool and said, If fellow Taoist Huang is embarrassed, I can modify this magic tool of yours into a consumable magic tool. Consumable magic tool? Xiaohua was slightly dazed. He had never heard of this kind of magic tool. Hee. The cultivator laughed and placed the 2 magic tools on the ground. He said, This is what my crafty workshop calls it. I hope Senior can dispel my confusion. Fellow Taoist must know that magic tools can be detonated. The cultivator glanced at Xiaohua, seeming to already know Xiaohua's cultivation. He said, Since magic tools can be detonated, why can't you refine some magic tools that only use detonation? Of course. Xiaohua suddenly understood and laughed. Presumably, refining this consumable magic tool doesn't require too many materials and profound formations, right? Precisely so. The cultivator nodded and said, But these materials are rather special. Moreover, they have a strong point. Xiaohua asked curiously, What strong point? Enormous power. The cultivator said somewhat complacently, If there are materials with fellow Taoist cultivation, if you succeed, you can kill an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Hiss, Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. He didn't know if he was surprised by the magic tool's power or the cultivator before him's cultivation. From what Senior said, if Junior's magic tool is made into a consumable magic tool, Senior already has some demonic beast materials? Xiaohua probed, What other materials are needed? How many spirit stones will it cost? We also need the lizard's glue bone. The cultivator said, With this lizard's glue bone, the magic tool made from it has a 70% chance of killing an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Otherwise, it can only have a 30% chance. So that's how it is. Xiaohua suddenly understood. Presumably, he wanted to use the lizard's concealment divine ability. Waiting for the cultivator to state the number of spirit stones, Xiaohua inwardly muttered to himself. What does fellow Taoist Huang plan to do? The cultivator saw that a long time had passed and asked somewhat unhappily. The crafty workshop really lives up to its reputation. Xiaohua laughed and waved his hand. The 2 magic tools were brushed to the side, and he took out the 100-layer cloud seal and MO cloud armor. The cultivator saw the 2 magic tools and was also stunned. Chapter 1711. Senior, please don't blame me. Xiaohua handed over the 2 magic treasures and smiled apologetically. This is Junior's first time coming to the craftsman's workshop, so I couldn't help but have some probing in my heart. Please forgive me. The cultivator stared at Xiaohua for a long time and smiled. I didn't expect fellow Taoist Huang to be so secretive. An aura refining cultivator actually has 2 magic treasures? Heh. Xiaohua smiled. I won't hide it from Senior, the first 2 magic treasures are juniors. These 2 magic treasures? Heh. Fellow Taoist Huang doesn't need to say too much. This old man was just casually asking. The cultivator waved his hand and carefully examined the 100-layer cloud seal and MO cloud armor. After a long time, the cultivator asked, how do you want to deal with these 2 magic treasures? Do you want to reforge them? Or do you want to change their appearance? Senior, what do you mean? Xiaohua didn't have any thoughts in his heart and asked sincerely. Junior is just following orders. The specifics will depend on Senior. Then this old man won't be polite. The cultivator turned the 2 magic treasures over and over again and said, defensive magic treasures have always been rare. The reason is that defensive formations are rarely seen. At the same time, it's difficult to refine them into magic treasures. Although fellow Taoists' 2 magic treasures are somewhat damaged, the defensive formations at the core are intact. It won't be easy to refine them again, but changing their appearance is possible. However, this old man thinks that it would be better to combine these 2 magic treasures into one and refine them into a defensive robe. Great. Xiaohua's eyes lit up. He clapped his hands and said, my humble sect? That's the order. Yes, but although the price of refining 2 magic treasures together is lower than refining 2 magic treasures separately, the amount of spirit stones required is also not small. I wonder if fellow Taoist is prepared? The cultivator indifferently asked. I won't hide it from Senior. I'm afraid the spirit stones in Junior's storage pouch aren't enough. Xiaohua smiled apologetically. Junior does have some old spirit herbs? Oh? Fellow Taoist also wants to trade spirit herbs and magic treasures? The cultivator was a bit surprised. Yeah. What's wrong? Xiaohua was slightly surprised. The cultivator shook his head and said, it's nothing. My workshop has always been accepting spirit stones and magic tools. But recently, some cultivators with powerful backgrounds had spirit stones, but they were all trading with spiritual herbs, magic tools, and even magic treasures. That's why I am a little puzzled. Others don't know, Junior just doesn't have enough spirit stones. Xiaohua laughed. It is indeed a little strange. The cultivator also smiled and said, I only hope that this old man's worries are groundless. All right, fellow Taoist can't be thinking of using these 2 magic tools to exchange for the spirit stones, right? That's right. Is that possible? Xiaohua's eyes lit up. Of course it's possible, but it's still not enough. You'll need spirit stones or spirit grass. The cultivator once again stated the amount of spirit stones he needed. Motherfucker, that's a lot. Xiaohua calculated the number of spirit stones he had and said with a smile, this 4 phase can be used as spirit stones. Junior still wants to ask Senior to change this magic tool into a consumable magic tool. Saying that, Xiaohua took out the lizard's bone and handed it to the cultivator. Of course it's possible. The cultivator carefully looked at it and said, this old man will add some materials myself, it's not troublesome. These are the remaining spirit stones and a few stalks of spirit grass. Xiaohua was happy in his heart and took out some spirit stones and 5 stalks of spirit grass that were around 5,000 years old. Fellow Taoist doesn't need to be so anxious. The cultivator waved his hand and said, this 4 phase can be left behind. The other things can be handed over to the workshop the next time fellow Taoist comes to pick them up. I wonder when Junior will come next time? Xiaohua waved his sleeve and put away the spirit stones and spirit grass. This consumable magic tool is easy, you can come and pick it up after 20 days. As for these 2 magic tools, I'm afraid I won't be able to do it alone. I'll need other people to do it and it'll take a year. A year? Xiaohua was stunned. This long? Fellow Taoist Huang doesn't refine magic tools, so you don't know the difficulty of refining magic tools. The cultivator said with a smile, this is a magic tool. If I can refine it in a day, would it still be a magic tool? Junior's words have caused Senior to laugh. Xiao Hua quickly cupped his hands and said, this is your magic tablet next time. The cultivator waved his hand and another triangular magic tablet flew in front of Xiao Hua. Next time, you can use this magic tablet to come to my workshop to pick up a refined magic tool. In the future, you can also use it to ask us to help you refine magic tools. Of course, you can also give this magic tablet to a cultivator you think is reliable. Junior understands. Xiao Hua took the magic tablet and said with a smile, Junior will come and pick up the magic tool in 20 days. Good. Fellow Taoist, please. The cultivator raised his hand and cast an incantation seal onto a nearby wall. A small door suddenly appeared and his body began to distort as he gradually disappeared from the spot. Thank you, Senior. Xiao Hua very respectfully stood up and bowed. Outside the small door was the corridor of the 3rd floor. Xiao Hua walked on the corridor and the small door behind him gradually disappeared. There were no more rooms on the 3rd floor. Alas, this illusion is still not good. If I meet a golden core cultivator, I will be seen through. Fortunately, I can change my appearance, otherwise I really can't hide my whereabouts. Xiao Hua's eyes turned and came down from the 3rd floor. The cultivator called Xia Ming was waiting at the corner of the 2nd floor. When he saw Xiao Hua come down, he cupped his hands and said, Thank you for coming to my workshop, fellow Taoist. 20 days later, fellow Taoist can come and find me with the magic tablet. Senior White has already said that the rest of the spirit stones can wait for fellow Taoist to come 1 year later. It won't be too late to pay then. Very good. Xiao Hua smiled and left the workshop under Xia Ming's guidance. 2 of the foundation establishment cultivators on the 2nd floor didn't leave. When they saw Xiao Hua suddenly come down from the 3rd floor, they were even more surprised and couldn't help but take a few more glances. Knowing that these cultivators didn't understand the secret of the workshop, Xiao Hua sighed. It's really good to have a sect. If I was a loose cultivator, I'm afraid that even if I cracked my head, I still wouldn't know that this workshop can also do the shady business of repairing magic treasures. When he left the workshop, the sky was already dark. Xiao Hua identified the direction and was about to leave, but his gaze fell on a small building several tens of feet away. This building was simply piled up with huge stones, but its simplicity didn't appear simple. It even had a hint of great craftsmanship. Xiao Hua knew that this was the location of the secret auction in Weeping Moon City. Moreover, this time, it was almost time. Thinking of the anxious expression of the foundation establishment cultivator in the tea house just now, Xiao Hua couldn't help but think, others want to go but can't go. Don't tell me this young master will waste this opportunity? However, this young master's cultivation level is already there. It's not very appropriate to be seen through with a glance, right? Hee, if you can see through me, then so be it. It's not my true appearance anyway. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and said, Moreover, the pill formula for the clear flower pill still hasn't been found. Even if I return to the Imperial Thunder sect after traveling, I can only obtain a limited number of clear flower pills. The sect can't give the pill formula to me. Forget it, I'll go and try my luck. Maybe I can exchange it for the pill formula. After finishing his calculations, Xiao Hua walked towards the building. Perhaps it was still early, but when Xiao Hua arrived in front of the building, no other cultivators came with him. After looking around, Xiao Hua quickly walked in. The interior of the building was very ordinary, just like an ordinary inn. A few children of the 4th or 5th layer of the aura refining realm were standing inside. When they saw Xiao Hua enter, one of them very respectfully welcomed him. He bowed and saluted, Senior, are you here for a meal or to stay? This old man came to see if there are any demonic beast cores here. Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment, but still said the words in the command talisman. Sure enough, when the disciple heard this, he didn't find it strange. Instead, he smiled and said, Senior, please follow me. Soon after, the disciple took the lead and led Xiao Hua to a small house. The disciple pushed the door open and retreated to the side. Senior, please. Xiao Hua nodded and entered the small house. The disciple carefully closed the door and slowly walked away. Hearing the disciple's footsteps, Xiao Hua looked around and released his divine sense. This small house was different from the small house in the craftsman's workshop. The four walls were made of rough boulders. However, there was obviously an extremely powerful restriction on the boulders. Xiaohua's divine sense had just touched it when it was bounced back. Wait here. Xiaohua looked inside the small house. It was empty without any furnishings. The four walls were also blank. He couldn't help but be stunned. This disciple didn't say anything? But on second thought, those who could come to this secret auction were all Foundation Establishment and Golden Core seniors. It wasn't their first or second time, so there was naturally no need to remind them. There's still a bit of time. We'll talk about it when the time comes. Xiaohua sat cross-legged and closed his eyes to rest. Sure enough, after the time it took for an incense stick to burn, a light sound came from the stone wall behind Xiaohua. Xiaohua swept with his divine sense and saw a stone pop out from the wall behind him. When Xiaohua got up to take a look, he saw that the stone was caved in. The caved-in was exactly the same shape as the command talisman. Xiaohua understood. He patted his hand, took out the command talisman, and placed it in the caved-in area of the stone. It fit perfectly, without the slightest difference. With a "wung" sound, the stone disappeared along with the command talisman. At this time, the four walls of the small house where Xiaohua was in suddenly rotated. The restrictions on the four walls were completely activated, and a powerful threat was born from the four walls. Attack formation. Xiaohua's divine sense swept and his face immediately changed. The power of this activation formation was very strong. It was definitely not something that Xiaohua could deal with his current cultivation. Damn it. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. He immediately took out the cloud-suppressing seal to protect his body. The four walls rotated even faster. It didn't slow down in the slightest because Xiaohua took out his magic treasure. Seeing the stone wall disappear, the ground under his feet also gradually disappeared. Xiaohua felt as if he was standing in the void. Just as Xiaohua was panicking at the place where the stone disappeared, a gorgeous three-colored brilliance appeared. Then, a rainbow bridge quickly stretched out, extending to Xiaohua's feet. Chapter 1712. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He stepped on the rainbow bridge, and a tricolored light barrier appeared on top of the rainbow bridge, protecting Xiaohua. At the same time, the rainbow bridge brought Xiaohua back. When the rainbow bridge had shrunk by half, from the four walls of the small house, as well as the arrays above and below, endless flames appeared, engulfing the entire small house. Only the light barrier Xiaohua was in didn't have the slightest trace of flames. Oh my god! This is too powerful, right? Xiaohua admittedly knew the fire escape technique, but within the flames of this array, which was used to deal with Foundation Establishment and even Gold Core Realm cultivators, he would probably not even have a corpse left. When Xiaohua's figure disappeared into the flaming stone wall, the entire small house was completely engulfed in flames. Xiaohua's eyes first darkened, then brightened. He was once again in a space with a radius of 1 zhang. In the center of this space was a jade table, and on top of it was a black robe. Do I need to change my clothes? Xiaohua scanned it with his divine sense. His divine sense actually couldn't penetrate the robe, and he immediately understood what Changfian said. Ah, good, so that's how it is. Xiaohua laughed loudly, and used his hand to pick up the robe. It was a strange Taoist robe. When Xiaohua put on the Taoist robe, his entire body was concealed within the robe, and no one could see that Xiaohua was wearing the camouflage robe. This robe is really strange. My divine sense can penetrate from the inside, but it can't penetrate from the outside. It can't penetrate at all. No wonder Senior Chang said it wouldn't be exposed. Just as Xiaohua was thinking, a light came from a corner of the space. Xiaohua quickly walked towards the corner of the space. Although the corner looked very close, Xiaohua walked for the time it took to brew a cup of tea to reach it. In front of him was a small door. When Xiaohua looked back, the entire small house seemed incomparably huge. This method, it's really a brilliant method. Xiaohua sighed slightly, and plunged into the small door. When Xiaohua came out of the small door, he saw a rather large hall in front of him. In the middle of the hall, there was a rather large round jade table. Next to the table, there were more than 10 jade chairs. At the head of the table, a cultivator wearing a black robe was already standing there. Following behind Xiaohua were also a dozen cultivators dressed in black Taoist robes. However, they were all standing in different positions within the hall. As for their cultivation, Xiaohua was unable to see through them. Xiaohua slightly sized up the entire hall. The other cultivators didn't stop and directly walked towards the jade chairs closest to them. Seeing this, Xiaohua did not dare to tarry and quickly left. Behind him, the small door gradually disappeared. When Xiaohua walked to the front of the chair, the other people also arrived. However, everyone stood in front of the chair and didn't sit down. The cultivator at the head of the table glanced at the empty chairs and said in a strange voice, "Well, fellow Taoists, today's secret auction is about to start. I'm afraid there are some fellow Taoists who don't have time to come. Fellow Taoists, please take a seat." Seeing that the cultivator sat down, everyone also sat down. Only then did Xiaohua slowly sit down. "Well, fellow Taoists, according to the convention of the secret auction, I will first take out 3 things. Fellow Taoists, you can start bidding. As for who will get the things in the end, it will be decided by I. After I, starting from I's left hand, fellow Taoists can take out 3 things to bid. Except for I who has the right to bid first, the other fellow Taoists who can bid for the things will also be decided by the owner of the things. Fellow Taoists, you don't have any objections, right? We don't." Seeing everyone speak in unison, Xiaohua also hurriedly muttered, "Well, fellow Taoists are all frequent guests of the secret auction. I won't say much." That cultivator was very direct. He patted his hand, took out a jade box from his storage bag, and placed it on the table. "This is a 3,000-year-old profound Yin spirit grass. Fellow Taoists, please bid." "Ah? 3,000-year-old profound Yin spirit grass?" Xiaohua was shocked. He knew that Xiansword sects Zhang Yutong and Zhang Yuha traveled thousands of miles to Meng country's Taiqing sect to look for profound Yin spirit grass. They even took out their magic treasures to prepare for the exchange. He didn't expect that the first thing to be bid in the secret auction of Weeping Moon City would be this profound Yin spirit grass. Moreover, it was a 3,000-year-old one. Damn, Senior Chang was right. This secret auction is really good stuff. Even if it's just to broaden my horizons, it's still good. Immediately, Xiaohua understood that the pill formula of the clear flower pill that he was thinking of was probably not something that could be taken out in this secret auction. "I want to take a look at the color first," a cultivator not far from Xiaohua said. His voice was also very strange. "Fellow Taoist, please." The cultivator at the head pointed his finger. The jade box slowly moved across the table and stopped in front of the other cultivator. That cultivator opened the jade box and looked at it. He smiled and said, "It really is a 3,000-year-old profound Yin spirit grass. Very good." Then he said a number of spirit stones. The number was really big. Xiaohua's face was full of wry smile. He thought, it seems that this young master has to find a way to get some spirit stones. Without tens of thousands of spirit stones, there's no need to come to this kind of place. The 3,000-year-old profound Yin spirit grass attracted a lot of attention, and several cultivators continued to bid. When everyone stopped, the cultivator at the head of the table said, "Which fellow Taoist has other magic tools, magic treasures, or materials of similar value? You can show them to this poor Taoist now. If it's only spirit grass, then there's no need. And fellow Taoist, what do you think of this thing I have?" A cultivator took out a jade box and put it on the table. He pushed it in front of the cultivator at the head. The cultivator at the head opened it and looked. He then retreated and said, "Fellow Taoist, this thing is really good. However, I won't be bidding for it for the time being." That cultivator didn't answer. He put away the jade box and looked at it quietly. "Take a look at this thing I have." Another cultivator also took out a jade box, but it still didn't catch the cultivator's eye. Then a few more people also failed. In the end, the cultivator said, "If fellow Taoists have nothing else to bid, then this poor Taoist will give this to the fellow Taoist who just paid the spirit stone." After a moment of silence, a cultivator opposite Xiao Hua said hesitantly, "I do have something, but I'm afraid I'll make a fool of myself." "No matter. Fellow Taoist, take it out and let me have a look." That cultivator also took out a jade bottle and put it on the table. Unexpectedly, that cultivator glanced at it and also hesitated for a moment. He said, "Fellow Taoist, this thing is barely suitable." As he said that, he waved his hand. The jade box containing the profound Yin spirit grass flew in front of that cultivator. "Good, thank you, fellow Taoist." That cultivator was obviously surprised. He waved his hand and put away the jade box. "So that's how it is." Xiao Hua understood. In this secret auction, as long as the owner of the item is interested in it, it doesn't matter how much others bid. Chapter 1713. That cultivator who acted as the steward was clearly very satisfied. Putting away the jade bottle, he took out another jade bottle and said, "This is I's second item, a nascent gestation pill. Who wants to see its quality?" "A nascent gestation pill?" Hearing this, Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. He knew that this nascent gestation pill was a medicinal pill used by core formation cultivators before they attacked nascent soul cultivation. Cultivators who took the nascent gestation pill could increase their chances of entering nascent soul by 30%. This kind of medicinal pill was even more precious than the nascent gestation pill used to attack nascent soul. Moreover, Xiao Hua also knew at this time that the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples were routinely provided with ordinary medicinal pills before they reached core formation late stage. As for the other special medicinal pills, such as the Elaine pill and clear flower pill used by Foundation establishment cultivators, as well as the soul concentrating pill, nascent gestation pill, and nascent gestation pill used by core formation cultivators, etc., all of these were obtained by relying on one's own luck. The nascent gestation pill appearing in this auction secret meeting was a medicinal pill that not even the cultivation sects could provide. How could he not be shocked? Unfortunately, looking at the other cultivators, each and every one of them was sitting steadily without any expression of shock at all. "Damn, this young master has seen it." Xiao Hua inwardly curled his lips. This Dawn Rain Continent's cultivation world is really deep. This young master is just a frog sitting in a well and looking at the sky. All the cultivators seemed to be scheming, and no one rushed to bid first. The main hall was silent for no less than the time it took to brew a cup of tea before someone called out a number of spirit stones. Immediately after, among the 10+ cultivators, there were 5 cultivators who frequently increased the price. Xiao Hua's eyelids kept twitching as he watched from the side. Needless to say, these 5 cultivators were absolutely all core formation cultivators. Otherwise, they wouldn't covet the nascent gestation pill. Thinking about how there were so many core formation cultivators next to him, Xiao Hua somewhat couldn't sit still. This kind of pressure in the bottom of his heart was really great. He couldn't see through other people's cultivation, but that didn't mean that other people couldn't see through his cultivation. When the last cultivator called out the number, the entire main hall regained its tranquility. The cultivator at the head seat looked left and right, and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, the price of spirit stones is like this. Which fellow Taoist still has something of equivalent value?" "I have it here." The 2 cultivators who were bidding earlier clapped their hands at the same time and each took out a jade box. They presented it to the cultivator at the head of the table. The cultivator opened it separately, looked at it a few times, closed it again, and returned it to the 2. He said, "Fellow Taoists, your items are really good. Unfortunately, I can't use them." With that, he pointed at the jade bottle before him. The jade bottle flew toward the cultivator who had just bid. The cultivator clearly couldn't contain his excitement. He waved his hand and put the jade bottle into his bag of holding. Then the cultivator's movements became graceful. He took out a bag of holding and handed it over to the cultivator at the head of the table. He smiled and said, "Fellow cultivator, please take a look to see if the number of spirit stones matches." The cultivator at the head of the table opened the bag of holding and scanned it with his divine sense. He smiled and said, "The number of spirit stones is just right. Many thanks for fellow Taoist support." Then, the cultivator put away the bag of holding and took out another item. He threw it into the air. A jade-green brilliance rose into the air like the bright moon in the night sky. A burst of sound of waves hitting the shore rushed into Xiaohua's mind. Xiaohua felt a wave of dizziness and his vision went black. Xiaohua was greatly shocked. He didn't care about being noticed and immediately used the exquisite leaf scripture. The Buddha Sarira in Xiaohua's mind flashed a few times, and only then did the dizziness in Xiaohua's mind was expelled. What kind of magic treasure is this? Xiaohua's mind was still unsettled. He raised his eyes to look at the jade-green bead in the main hall and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This is a real magic treasure, right? It actually didn't need anyone to activate it. Just by its own power, it can pass through the maze. Also, this black Taoist robe is even more mysterious than the maze. Compared to it, this young master's cloud-suppressing seal really isn't worth mentioning. A glint of jealousy appeared in Xiaohua's eyes, and his determination to restore the cloud-suppressing seal became even more firm. The other cultivators were far from being affected by Xiaohua's shock. They all released their divine senses and firmly locked onto the bead. This is the magic treasure tied bead. As for its specific function, presumably I don't need to introduce it, right? Everyone is a big family. If I say too much, I'll just make a fool of myself. The cultivator in the seat of honor pointed with his finger, and the tied bead suddenly enlarged like a wheel. As it spun, a jade-green brilliance burst forth like a jade-green flame, circling around the entire main hall. The spiritual aura of the world inside the main hall was drawn by the bead, and the bright flower stones on the four walls also dimmed and lost their color. Too awesome! Upon seeing this, the faint trace of luck in Xiaohua's heart also disappeared without a trace. This magic treasure is definitely not something an aura-refining cultivator can control. Yes, even if it's a foundation-building cultivator, I'm afraid it'll be extremely easy for it to backfire. Quick! The cultivator in the seat of honor recited an incantation and pointed with his finger. The tied bead rapidly shrank and turned into a speck of fluorescent light that fell into his hand. "Fellow Taoists, you may place your bids." Just as the voice of the cultivator in the seat of honor fell, a cultivator hurriedly said, "Fellow Taoist, I didn't expect that such a magic treasure would appear in this secret auction, so I didn't prepare enough spirit stones. Is it possible to postpone the bidding for 2 hours?" Fellow Taoist is confused. As long as you entered the secret auction, how can you leave midway? Since fellow Taoist didn't prepare enough spirit stones, that means you don't have fate with this magic treasure. I can't help even if I want to. Alas, forget it. What a pity. That cultivator let out a long sigh and said very dejectedly. The one who spoke was the cultivator who had just won the nascent conception pill. Naturally, he was also a core formation cultivator. Out of the 5 core formation cultivators, only 4 were bidding now. What surprised Xiaohua was that 3 other cultivators also joined in the bidding, and, in the end, only these 3 cultivators were competing to increase the price. So, these 3 are nascent soul cultivators. Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization, and sweat immediately appeared on his forehead. Ever since he started cultivating, he'd only met several nascent soul cultivators. Each and every one of them was a person with remarkable abilities. In front of them, Xiaohua felt that he was just an ant. In this secret auction, among the dozen or so cultivators, there were 5 Jindan cultivators, 3 nascent soul cultivators, and the rest, except for Xiaohua, who was an aura-refining cultivator, were probably all late-stage foundation-building cultivators, right? Fortunately, everyone was wearing mysterious black Taoist robes, so no one knew each other's identity, and no one knew that there was an insignificant existence among them. As expected, the 3 nascent soul cultivators were rich and overbearing. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, only one cultivator won. That cultivator in the seat of honor didn't ask the others if there was anything of similar value, and directly waved his hand. The tide bead flew in front of the winning cultivator and was swallowed by that cultivator. That nascent soul cultivator similarly waved his hand, and a storage pouch flew over. All right, I's 3 items have been completed. Next, it's this fellow Taoist's turn. The cultivator in the seat of honor slightly raised his hand, indicating the cultivator on his left. After these 3 rounds of bidding, Xiaohua already knew that the next cultivator to take out the item should be a core formation cultivator. Moreover, he also participated in the bidding just now, but he didn't succeed. That cultivator placed a brocade box on the table and said with a smile, "I have a piece of gold fragment here. It's a necessity for refining magic weapons. Which fellow Taoist wants it? I have already seen this item, so I give up my priority right. Fellow Taoists, please make your bids." The cultivator in the seat of honor said. Just like before, there were 3 cultivators bidding. Looking at the situation, 2 of them were foundation building cultivators, and 1 was a core formation cultivator. As usual, when the 3 people called out the number of spirit stones, that cultivator said, "If any fellow Taoist doesn't have enough spirit stones, you can take out something of equivalent value to exchange." Hearing this, Xiaohua's mind became somewhat active. This piece of gold fragment was exactly as that cultivator said. It was a necessity for refining magic weapons, and the cloud-suppressing seal's exterior was full of holes. If he wanted to repair it, this piece of gold fragment was indispensable. Although he couldn't repair the cloud-suppressing seal right now, he had to prepare all kinds of materials in advance. However, the only valuable things he had on him were the fire essence flame crystals and spiritual herbs. Needless to say, he wouldn't be willing to exchange for the fire essence flame crystals even if he took out the mist-tide beads, so he could only take out spiritual herbs. However, the other party was a core formation cultivator, so the spiritual herbs he wanted naturally had to be of a high grade and had to be of sufficient age. Xiaohua couldn't take out several kinds of spiritual herbs all at once, right? Therefore, after thinking for a moment, Xiaohua took out the stalk of spirit grass, placed it on the table, and pushed it towards that cultivator, saying, "I have something here. I don't know if it's to fellow Taoist's liking." At the same time, another cultivator at the side also pushed a jade box towards that cultivator. The cultivator opened the 2 items and looked at them again and again. He seemed to be hesitating. Soon after, he returned the other cultivator's jade box and put away Xiaohua's spirit grass. A strange voice sounded, "Fellow Taoist, this thing is to my liking. This time, fellow Taoist has gotten a bargain." Ha! Xiaohua was overjoyed. Seeing the gold fragments floating in front of his eyes, he put them away with a flick of his sleeve and said inwardly, "Finally, this trip wasn't in vain." Subsequently, 2 magic weapons, several core formation medicinal pills, 2 jade talismans, 3 sets of formation discs and formation talismans, more than 10 demonic beast cores, and even 2 sword pellets were all taken out by the cultivators in succession. Apart from the 2 jade talismans that were taken away by the cultivators with priority, the other items were all exchanged by other cultivators using spirit stones or items. Apart from the jade talismans and sword pellets, Xiaohua didn't have any interest in the other items. However, he was still a bit worried. His spirit grass had already been exchanged. If it was his turn to take out something, wouldn't he have to take out a spiritual herb? A stalk of several thousand years old spirit grass already made Xiaohua somewhat uneasy. Wouldn't it be even more troublesome if there was more? Fortunately, a cultivator in front of Xiaohua said, "I don't dare to take out my item to show my incompetence. Let's wait and see if the other fellow Taoists have anything to exchange." Subsequently, this cultivator didn't take out anything, and it was the turn of the cultivators behind him. Naturally, when it was Xiaohua's turn, Xiaohua followed suit. Just when Xiaohua thought that this secret auction would end so peacefully with him obtaining the gold fragments, there was a little unforeseen event. Chapter 17:14. Because on Xiaohua's right side, in addition to 2 gold core cultivators, there was only 1 nascent soul cultivator. The items of those 2 gold core cultivators were very rare. Xiaohua had never heard of them, let alone bid for them. As for the items of nascent soul cultivators, Xiaohua boasted that he didn't have the ability or the financial support. Just as Xiaohua closed his eyes to rest and wait for the first auction of his life to end, the nascent soul stage cultivator coughed and said, "I've already bid for an item and I don't have anything good to take out from my storage bag. However, since it's not easy for everyone to participate, I will make a fool of myself." As he said that, he clapped his hand and took out a long jade box. He placed it on the table and said, "I obtained this when I went to the Meng Mountains a few years ago and accidentally killed a soul cultivator. I don't know which fellow Taoist is interested in it." As soon as his voice fell, the cultivator at the head of the table responded, "Fellow Taoist has such a good item, how can you say that you are making a fool of yourself? I will take a look first." The cultivator at the head of the table opened the jade box and pointed his finger. Gradually, a pale white bone flew out of the jade box. Hearing the word, soul cultivator, Xiaohua was naturally curious. He opened his eyes and saw the white bone. His eyes lit up and he thought to himself, isn't this a white bone from the space? Something that recorded the green seal script? Everyone released their divine sense. Xiaohua knew that his cultivation base was shallow, so he didn't dare to release his divine sense for fear of revealing any flaws. He could only watch from afar. When he saw the cultivator at the head of the table, he cast a few spells on the white bone. The white bone gradually emitted a faint green brilliance, and thumb-sized characters appeared one after another. "Oh, this isn't the green seal script?" Xiaohua's eyes were very sharp. With a glance, he could clearly see that although the faint green characters were somewhat similar to the green seal script, they looked more similar to the cultivation characters of Xiaoyu continent. Haha, this is a soul cultivator's cultivation method. The cultivator at the head of the table grabbed his hand, and the green light on the white bone disappeared. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, you are lucky. I will use my right of priority." The nascent soul cultivator said, "Although the auction has always prohibited the bidding of cultivation methods, pill formulas, and equipment refining methods, since this is a soul cultivator's cultivation method, it should not be prohibited. Since fellow Taoist has a discerning eye, I naturally won't say anything." What? The secret auction forbids the bidding of cultivation methods? Only now did Xiaohua understand why there weren't any cultivation methods or pill recipes that he was interested in. Cultivation techniques, pill recipes, and refining methods are too sensitive and can often affect the cultivation structure of the Dawn Rain continent. My secret auction can still be considered as the highest authority in Chiyu City, but it's not enough to be considered as a neutral force in the entire Dawn Rain continent. Besides, the fact that the secret auction could have such an effect was all thanks to the support of fellow cultivators. Ordinary cultivation techniques and pill recipes might not be able to catch your attention. In that case, wouldn't it be better for us to live in harmony? Why do I have to do something that might cause misunderstandings among all the fellow Taoists in my secret auction? The cultivator on the seat of honor said, "And this soul cultivator's cultivation method has nothing to do with the orthodoxy of fellow cultivators, so I will accept it according to the rules." After saying that, the cultivator on the seat of honor handed a storage pouch to the nascent soul cultivator. "Fellow Taoist, please take a look and see if this number is suitable. If not, I will take out a number that will satisfy fellow Taoist." "Idiot," Xiaohua sighed with emotion. "Isn't this just giving people spirit stones?" Unexpectedly, the nascent soul cultivator opened the storage pouch and took a look, then said with a smile, "The number of spirit stones that fellow Taoist gave is very fair. I am very satisfied." Xiaohua was dumbfounded. Soon after, the cultivator on the seat of honor put away the white bone and said, "Fellow Taoists, do you have any other items to bid? If not, I would like to ask fellow Taoist to—" "Fellow Taoist, please wait." The nascent soul cultivator put away the storage pouch, then waved his hand and said, "I still have a rare item." It seems that fellow Taoist's trip to Millions Mountain Range was very fruitful. The cultivator on the seat of honor was a little surprised. The nascent soul cultivator shook his head and said, "Actually, I was doing something else to avoid those soul cultivators. But who knew that something had happened in Meng Mountains? Everything was in chaos, and I had no time to avoid them. So, I had no choice but to kill my way out. Alas, I won't talk about the specific difficulties. As he said that, he clapped his hand and took out a strange oil lamp, placed it on the table and said, "According to the soul cultivator that I killed, from the soul-searching technique, their soul cultivator summoned their soul demon from the 10,000 demon realm. This thing should be brought by the soul demon from the 10,000 demon realm." Ah? Xiao Hua was stunned. He'd never heard of it, and even the books of the lightning-controlling sect had never mentioned it. Of course, Xiao Hua came to a sudden understanding right after that. Isn't there no records of the Buddhist sect in the books as well? Didn't it still exist? Obviously, the few Foundation establishment cultivators and Golden Core cultivators had never heard of it, like Xiao Hua. None of them spoke, or they were waiting for the cultivator on the seat of honor to speak. The cultivator on the seat of honor waved his hand, and the strange oil lamp flew into his hand. The cultivator looked around and pondered for a while, then shook his head and said, "Fellow Taoist, from the material of this oil lamp, I can't tell whether it's something from the 10,000 demon realm. However, the little spiritual fire on the wick shouldn't be something from the Xiaoyu continent. Perhaps the thing that fellow Taoist obtained from the soul-searching is true. It's a pity that this thing has been severely damaged. Out of the 10 halts of the main body, 7 halts have been damaged. The fire essence of the spiritual fire in the wick has been destroyed, leaving only the fire shell on the surface. It's completely useless. The only thing that's useful is the 3 drops of oil in the lamp. But what's the use of this oil? I'm afraid that the soul cultivator doesn't know, right?" The cultivator changed the topic. Fellow Taoist is right. The nascent soul cultivator didn't hide it and said with a smile, "That soul cultivator fought I with this thing. If I didn't use my full strength, how could I get this thing? I didn't intend to damage this thing. It's just that this spiritual fire is really powerful. The drop of innate heavy water in I's magic treasure is almost no match for it. This kind of thing is too demonic, I don't dare to use it." The cultivator on the seat of honor waved his hand, and the worn-out oil lamp fell on the table. "Fellow Taoists, take a look and see who wants it." Several Foundation establishment cultivators and Golden Core cultivators listened to the words of the cultivator on the seat of honor. They knew that this thing wasn't something they could use, so they all shut their mouths. Xiao Hua also had the same plan, but when he heard that there was a little spiritual fire on the oil lamp, his heart suddenly became active. However, this spiritual fire had no fire essence, so he hesitated. "Do you want it or not? If you want it, what will you give in exchange?" At this moment, another nascent soul cultivator said, "How about this, I will give a price and take this thing back to sea." As he said this, he waved his hand and threw a storage pouch on the table. Chapter 17:15. This. Xiao Hua, who was originally hesitant, became even more conflicted when he saw a nascent soul cultivator bidding. He couldn't figure out the truth of the matter, whether or not it was as the other party said. He just casually offered a price and brought it back to take a look. If it really was an item that a nascent soul cultivator must have, then he would have ruined the other party's good fortune for no reason. Not only did he fail to cultivate his frigid flame, he would also become an undead in the other party's hands. That was a nascent soul cultivator. He had countless methods to kill Xiao Hua without letting him know. Moreover, Xiao Hua only heard that there was a fire shell of spiritual fire. He also connected it to the fact that he didn't have a pure frigid flame seed. Then, he thought about what Luan Qing said about fire seeds of the 5 elements. Only then did an unimaginable thought appear in his mind. In the future, when I cultivate the light escape technique and temper my bones, I will need to find the so-called 5 elements. Since that's the case, why don't I use this fire shell of spiritual fire to contain the 5 elements? Perhaps it can produce the so-called 5 elements fire seeds? Of course, Xiao Hua's thought was only a possibility, a thought only. If no one bid, Xiao Hua could effortlessly take out a spirit grass of about the same age and obtain it. But now, it seems that this was already an extravagant hope. Fellow Taoists? Is there no one interested in this thing? The nascent soul cultivator chuckled, his voice becoming very strange. fellow Taoist, I was also curious. I never had the chance to go to Mount Meng, so I wanted to take a look at this thing. If someone really wanted it, wouldn't they have already bid? The nascent soul cultivator laughed. Fine. Just as the nascent soul cultivator was about to speak, Xiaohua finally couldn't help but speak up like a wronged little wife. That senior, junior, has a fire attribute physique. Right now, I'm stuck at a bottleneck. Junior wants to use the spiritual fire to break through the bottleneck. I don't know if senior can let me pass. What were you doing earlier? The nascent soul cultivator who bid didn't know whether to laugh or cry, cursing. If you bid earlier, why would I bid? Say, senior, junior, didn't have anything good, but this thing really attracted junior, so junior didn't dare to rashly bid. Xiaohua's pitiful tone under the black Taoist robe was unpleasant to hear. Motherfucker, you know the price now? Yes, junior understands. However, senior, Xiaohua said bitterly. What do you have in exchange? The nascent soul cultivator from before said disdainfully, although you urgently need this spiritual fire, if there is nothing that I want, how can I give it to you? This nascent soul cultivator clearly knew that Xiaohua did not have enough spirit stones. Unexpectedly, Xiaohua didn't hesitate in the slightest. He clapped his hands and took out 2 jade boxes from his storage pouch, handing them over to the 2 nascent soul cultivators respectively. He smiled apologetically and said, "These are the only things Junior has that might be of equal value to this spiritual fire. Senior, please inspect them. In addition, this jade box is Junior's gift to the senior. Although it isn't precious, it is Junior's token of appreciation. Because of Junior's negligence, Senior has worked hard. Please forgive Senior." When Xiaohua was speaking just now, he had already thought it through. The other party was a nascent soul cultivator, so the spiritual plants he needed were definitely out of the ordinary. What origin returning grass, Elian green fruit, he shouldn't take them out to make a fool of himself. He had obtained many nameless seeds from 100 Herbs Gates Jianghu. Counting them now, they should be more than 10,000 years old. Xiaohua picked a spiritual plant similar to the divine shadow grass. Xiaohua had seen this divine shadow grass in ancient records before. It should be a rare spiritual plant in Dawn Rain continent. It had always been a supplementary medicine for nascent soul cultivators to refine nascent formation pills, but even supplementary medicine couldn't be lacking. Naturally, the spiritual plant Xiaohua gave to that cultivator was not 10,000 years old. When that cultivator saw the divine shadow grass, he was slightly surprised. After a moment, he smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist is considerate. This old man still needs it." But that cultivator didn't say anything about giving the spiritual fire to Xiaohua. Speaking up to hear, he slightly tilted his head. Obviously, this divine shadow grass was very much to his liking. He didn't want to lose this thing, but he also didn't want to offend another nascent soul cultivator because of it. Forget it. The other nascent soul cultivator opened Xiaohua's jade box and took a look. He smiled and said, "You little cultivator really knows how to curry favor with both sides. Since this spiritual fire is beneficial to you, how can this old man compete with you?" As he spoke, he waved his hand and put the jade box into his arms. "Since you have good intentions, this old man won't hide it from you. This spiritual fire is the fire seed of the 10,000 demon realm. Although it is only a fire shell left, it is not something that cultivators below gold core stage can use. If you are at gold core middle stage, you can use this spiritual fire to break through the bottleneck. If you are at gold core early stage, then think of other ways." Yes, this junior understands. Hearing that nascent soul cultivator's words, it seemed that even he couldn't see through his own cultivation. Xiaohua was even more delighted and quickly responded, "This junior will remember senior's instructions." This spiritual fire belongs to fellow Taoist. The nascent soul cultivator waved his hand and the broken oil lamp flew in front of Xiaohua. Xiaohua waved his hand and the oil lamp disappeared into his space. After the nascent soul cultivator, there were 2 other cultivators who also took out their own things. However, compared to the previous items, They were much worse, so Xiaohua didn't pay much attention to them. Well, fellow Taoists, this secret auction ends here. 3 years later, if fate wills it, we will meet again. After everyone finished exchanging, the cultivator at the top clapped his hands and laughed. Then, without saying another word, his whole body flew straight up into the sky and disappeared in an instant. Xiaohua raised his eyes to look. Indeed, at the top of the round table and the corresponding chair, there was a round hole the size of a person. Inside the round hole, a crimson light was faintly discernible. A huge suction force came from the hole, and without Xiaohua urging his magic power, his entire body was pulled into the round hole. Above the round hole was a small space. Just like when Xiaohua came, there was also a jade table. On the table, there was a jade plate. Xiaohua understood that this jade plate should be where the black robe was placed. Xiaohua was very reluctant to take off the black robe. He didn't know how this robe was made, but even nascent soul cultivators couldn't see through it. Moreover, in the secret auction just now, everyone was wearing the same black robe. To be honest, even if Xiaohua were to participate in it again, he wouldn't be able to distinguish which cultivator was the one who bid just now. When Xiaohua placed the robe on the jade plate, he saw a corner of the space suddenly flash with a 3-colored brilliance. A layer of runes flashed from the brilliance. This seems to be a transmission array? Xiaohua scanned the area with his divine sense and immediately sensed the difference between this brilliance and the runes. He didn't dare to be careless and stepped in. When the brilliance and the runes spread, they covered his entire body. As the brilliance flourished, Xiaohua's entire body disappeared. In a remote area of Weeping Moon City, Xiaohua's figures suddenly appeared. Before he could react, the brilliance of the teleportation array disappeared again. Xiaohua calmed himself down, looked around, and saw that there was no trace of a teleportation array under his feet. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Who is hosting this secret auction? Just a temporary teleportation array that can only be used for short-distance teleportation is not something that an ordinary sect can master. Who cares who it is? Xiaohua's eyes narrowed. He patted his chest very naturally and said with a smile, "This young master has benefited from it." Then, with a sweep of his divine sense, he slowly walked out of the secluded place. This was a remote place in Weeping Moon City, but there were still many shops and shops. Xiaohua simply strolled around slowly and bought a lot of things. Naturally, he had seen the grand scale of the auction and the secret auction. Xiaohua's vision had also widened, so he didn't feel too pained when buying materials and pills. Seeing that it was another artifact refinement shop, Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He walked in and saw a 4th-layer Qi refinement shop assistant come over to listen respectfully. Xiaohua looked at the dazzling array of materials and many artifacts under the restriction. He directly asked, "I want to buy a few puppets. Does your shop have them?" "Senior, I'm afraid you've come to the wrong shop." The shop assistant was slightly stunned. Then he smiled apologetically and said, "My humble shop only provides artifacts and artifact refinement materials. We don't have the puppets that Senior wants. Where can I find them in Weeping Moon City?" Xiaohua nodded. "To tell you the truth, I'm afraid you can't find them in Weeping Moon City." The shop assistant said without hesitation, "If Senior wants to buy them, you can go to the 7 Skills Sect's shop. Only they have the ability. However, from what I see, they don't seem to have them now." "Thank you, fellow cultivator." Xiaohua slightly cupped his hands and walked out of the shop. Speaking of puppets, Xiaohua also thought of them during the secret auction. He only had one puppet. Seeing that the space was getting bigger and there were more spiritual herbs, although he didn't need to take care of them every day, it was still a very tiring task to sort the spiritual herbs and plant them according to their age. One puppet was already not enough. However, although the Dawn Rain continent was big, he had never heard of any sect that specialized in refining puppets. Even the 7 Skills sect, from the shop assistant's tone, didn't have a large number of puppets for sale. Xiaohua waved his hand to find the spirit camel carriage and quickly rushed back to the inn. The situation in the inn was the same as before. The restrictions on the 3 people's rooms were all open, so he couldn't know if they were all in the room. However, according to Xiaohua's thoughts, since he had such a situation, those 3 people should be even more interesting than him, right? After entering the room, Xiaohua opened the restriction and closed his eyes to rest for a while. He couldn't help but take out the worn-out oil lamp. Just as the nascent soul cultivator said, the oil lamp was seriously damaged. There was only a bean-sized flame at the wick and 3 drops of oil at the bottom of the wick. Xiaohua was naturally not interested in the oil of the lamp, and his gaze was only on the flame. Chapter 17:16. The flame of this spiritual fire was very strange. It was not scorching hot like the samadhi true fire, nor was it burning like the icicle flame. This flame was just quiet, as if it would not move at all, and would not burn at all. Moreover, although the spiritual energy of heaven and earth around the flame was very rich, there was not a trace of it converging into the flame. It was as if the flame was separated from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Xiaohua thought for a moment, then he took out a small piece of spirit stone from the space and threw it into the flame. The flame was so pure that it was almost transparent. The spirit stone flashed and didn't seem to have any effect on it. Xiaohua thought for a long time about the so-called 10,000 demon world's spiritual fire. He also made a lot of guesses about its power, but he never thought that it would be like this. Then, Xiaohua took out a spiritual grass and placed it on top of the spiritual fire. It was still the same, the delicate branches and leaves were not damaged at all in the spiritual fire. What is this? A trace of regret and confusion emerged in Xiaohua's heart, but then he thought again and patted his head. Didn't I say it clearly? This spiritual fire already has no fire essence, only a fire shell, just a shell of spiritual fire. How can it burn? No wonder that nascent soul cultivator let it go so easily. I only took out a 2,000-year-old spiritual grass and fooled him. Xiaohua thought for a moment, and his left hand struck out a technique. It was the fire-controlling technique of the samadhi true fire. Then he pointed his finger, and the bean-sized flame flew out from the wick of the oil lamp and quietly floated in the air. Good. It's still a flame. Seeing that the spiritual fire could be controlled, Xiaohua was slightly relieved. Then he opened his mouth and spat out the icicle flame. The icicle flame flew to the side of the spiritual fire and burned vigorously. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth, whether it was metal, wood, water, fire, or earth, were all swallowed by it. It was very powerful, and formed a sharp contrast with the spiritual fire's stillness. How about I try fusing it? Xiaohua was a bit hesitant. This icicle flame only had a little bit, and the spiritual fire was also only a little bit. If there was any accident, Xiaohua would lose both. But if he did not try, Xiaohua would not give up. Right, can I use the true samadhi fire? Xiaohua patted his head, and a wisp of samadhi true fire appeared in his hand. Following a wave of Xiaohua's hand, that tiny wisp of samadhi true fire gradually approached the spirit fire, and Xiaohua released his Buddha sense. A burst of intense burning sensation appeared when the Buddhist consciousness approached the spiritual fire, causing Xiaohua to involuntarily groan. The pain from the Buddhist sense didn't make Xiaohua nervous. Instead, it gave birth to a trace of excitement. That's right, how bad could a spiritual fire that could burn the Buddhist sense be? Withdrawing his Buddhist sense, Xiaohua only stared at the spiritual fire and the true samadhi fire. He saw that the true samadhi fire was nearing the spiritual fire, but there was no reaction at all. The spiritual fire was also different from a transparent one, still motionless in place. The true samadhi fire entered. Damn it! Xiaohua scolded and raised his head impatiently. But when he raised his head, he felt that something was wrong. He looked left and right, then stared at the spirit fire for a long time, but he didn't notice anything wrong. Suddenly, Xiaohua came to a realization. It wasn't that the true samadhi fire entered the spirit fire, but he didn't see the true samadhi fire come out. Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and moved the spirit fire over, but the true samadhi fire wasn't inside. This spirit fire actually swallowed the true samadhi fire. Xiaohua was overjoyed, but that transparent spirit fire didn't seem to have any changes at all. Go, go, go! Xiaohua waved his hand in succession, and dozens of true samadhi fires flew into the spirit fire. The true samadhi fires that were much bigger than the spirit fire flew into the spirit fire, but the spirit fire still didn't have any changes. Xiaohua frowned slightly. I'm afraid that the true samadhi fire can't be used as the fire essence of the spirit fire. I wonder if the icicle flame can. When Xiaohua saw the icicle flame, he shook his head slightly, and even had some lingering fear in his heart. He said to himself, it's best not to try blindly for this matter. I didn't think too much about it just now. Fortunately, this true samadhi fire can't be used as the fire essence. If it could be used as the fire essence, then I wouldn't be able to use it as the five-colored fire seed. Xiaohua understood that this icicle flame was after all a heterogeneous fire seed. If he used it as the fire essence of the spirit fire, it would really be a pity. Previously, he didn't have the spirit fire, but now that he had the opportunity, how could he not consider creating a five-colored fire seed that was better for him? This icicle flame should be able to cultivate too, right? Xiaohua thought for a moment. It seemed that the Luan family's jade slip didn't say that it couldn't. Thus, Xiaohua sucked in his mouth, and the icicle flame's fire seed flew into his body. Soon after, Xiaohua hesitated a little, and struck a few seals on the spirit fire's fire seed. He sucked in his mouth, and similarly, the spirit fire seed entered his body. Then, he closed his eyes and meditated, and began to slowly cultivate the icicle flame's fire seed. As for the spirit fire's fire seed, it was just as Xiaohua thought. The cultivation seals were all useless. After an unknown number of days, the restriction in Xiaohua's room shook. Xiaohua opened his eyes, and opened the restriction. Qian Diheng was outside. I say, junior brother Xiao, another 10 days have passed. Shouldn't we be leaving? Looking at Qian Diheng's winking face, Xiaohua was very happy. Indeed, following Qian Diheng's entrance, Kun Fei Yan and Sun Shu also came in. Xiaohua smiled and said, I'm afraid that I will delay senior brother and senior sister for a few more days. Junior brother has encountered some problems in his cultivation, so I can't hurry on with my journey for the time being. It's okay, it's okay. Qian Diheng patted Xiaohua's shoulder and said, it's still too early to reach Jiangqing City. You should cultivate first. Then he turned to Sun Shu and the others and said, let's go out and buy some things? This kind of meditation cultivation can't improve cultivation. It's better to be active than to be still. Sun Shu glanced at Xiaohua, and didn't ask much. He turned and left. Kun Fei Yan, however, stared at Xiaohua a few times, and then looked at Qian Diheng. He smiled and said, junior brother Xiao didn't say anything, but junior brother Qian seems to be very familiar with junior brother Zhao's cultivation. Qian Diheng didn't answer, and turned and left. Before he left, he even winked at Xiaohua. More than 10 days later, in front of the teleportation array of Weeping Moon City, Xiaohua, Qian Diheng and the others disappeared. Outside the building of the teleportation array, an ordinary-looking cultivator, whose cultivation was only at the 10th level of qi refining, hurriedly walked out of a nearby tea house. He waved his hand and got on a spirit camel carriage, and came to a secluded courtyard. The disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect have left? Are they going to Jiangqing City? In the courtyard, in a secret room, a cultivator in his 50s, holding a long sword in his hand, looked at it over and over, and asked very confidently. Senior brother Chang, the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect have left, but whether they are going to Jiangqing City or not, I'm not sure. The cultivator who came in looked at the 12th level of qi refining with reverence and said carefully. Chapter 1717. If there's a condensed knowledge treasure, how could they not go? Senior brother Chang sneered, unless they're idiots. It's still senior martial brother Chang who strategizes and decides victory from 1,000 miles away. The disciple said respectfully, once the news of the condensed knowledge treasure spread, the Imperial Thunder sect's disciples will definitely fall into senior brother Chang's hands. Who said I was the one who spread the news? Senior brother Chang glanced at the disciple. The disciple was clearly stunned and blurted out, "Could it be, the news of the condensed knowledge treasure is true? Did I say that it's fake?" Senior brother Chang's lips curled into a smile. Then, that disciple's eyes clearly showed a trace of fanaticism, but before he could finish speaking, senior brother Chang mercilessly berated him. "You'd better wake up. Even if this condensing knowledge treasure belonged to your previous life, do you think you can escape from the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples after obtaining it? Do you think they'll allow another Foundation establishment or even Golden Core cultivator to appear?" The disciple's face immediately showed disappointment, but then he smiled apologetically. "I might not be able to, but senior brother Chang's talent is exceptional. The condensed knowledge treasure will definitely be senior brother Chang's." "Mine?" Senior brother Chang laughed loudly and looked at the furnishings in the room. "If I could refine the condensed knowledge treasure in my past life, how could I not reach Foundation establishment at the age of 50? Mo Feng, oh Mo Feng, don't forget, cultivators who can refine treasures all have great fortunes. Even if they reincarnate, how could they be like us?" Senior brother Chang is right, the cultivator called Mo Feng said in a low voice. Of course, if we can't get it, others can't get it so easily." Senior brother Chang said fiercely, "Even if I can't use it, I will still put it in my storage bag and admire it for the rest of my life." "Yes, disciple understands." Mo Feng smiled apologetically. "However, since the condensed knowledge treasure has appeared, not to mention the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples, the 4 of them are all at the 12th level of Qi refining. Obviously, they came out to travel and prepare to break through. Disciples from other sects with some background should also go, right? With our cultivation, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for us to deal with them." "That's what I should worry about." Senior brother Chang sneered. "You just need to do your own thing." "Disciple understands, disciple understands." Mo Feng said hurriedly, "Disciple will go back now." "Then you go." Senior Chang nodded, indicating for Mo Feng to leave immediately. After that, he sat on the cloud bed for a while before hurriedly leaving the secret room. 10 days later, in the southwest of Weeping Moon City, in a desolate place, above the scorched earth, Xiaohua and the other 3 were leisurely hurrying along. The 4 of them formed a shape, with Xiaohua and Qian Diheng flying in the front, Sun Shu and Kun Fian flying behind. Qian Diheng flew on the right side of Xiaohua, slightly behind. His eyes looked at Xiaohua from time to time, as if he wanted to see something from Xiaohua's body. When Xiaohua sensed something and turned his head, Qian Diheng hurriedly looked ahead. If it was a beautiful female cultivator, Xiaohua might be complacent, but Qian Diheng was a man, so Xiaohua naturally knew what he was thinking. He could only smile bitterly in his heart. Because after Xiaohua got the new consumable magic treasure from the workshop, Qian Diheng asked Xiaohua for a token that could be used to refine magic tools in the workshop. After all, the workshop only looked at tokens and didn't recognize people, so this token was the most important. But the problem was, Xiaohua still needed to use this token to refine magic tools, so how could he return it to Qian Diheng? What kind of magic tool needs a year to refine? At that time, Qian Diheng was shocked, but then he thought of magic tools. However, thinking about Xiaohua's background as a loose cultivator and also a disciple of the myriad Thunder Valley with no foundation, he was puzzled. Not to mention that magic tools were hard to find, even the spirit stones needed to refine magic tools were something that Xiaohua couldn't take out. Xiaohua's answer was very hesitant. He only said that the master refiner of the workshop had said that he would return the token to Qian Diheng after a year. Although Qian Diheng didn't ask any more, he was still worried. Could it be that this guy really has spirit stones? Taking the cloud-suppressing seal back to the furnace and refining it again? Xiaohua replied to Qian Diheng, but in his heart, he was really moved by the craftsmanship of the workshop. The consumable magic tool was stored in his space, and it was completely different from the previous spear-shaped magic tool. This was a 3-inch long rhombus-shaped magic tool. There was a green and red brilliance on it, and its surface was abnormally bright. Faintly, there were strange runes flashing on it. Moreover, this magic tool had another wonderful feature. which was that it could be seen clearly with the naked eye, but when one's divine sense swept over it, it was actually empty. I'm afraid this is the effect of the lizard's bones, Xiaohua thought. I didn't think that the bones and flesh of spirit beasts could be used like this. And that cultivator also had some spirit beast bones in his hands, and this magic tool also had some refined ones. According to what that cultivator said, I can use this magic tool to kill an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator with my 12th stage Qi refining cultivation, but my real cultivation has reached the middle stage Qi refining cultivation, then wouldn't I be able to kill a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator with this magic tool? Although it's only a few % chance, it's still better than having no chance at all. Xiaohua's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. Unfortunately, this magic tool, there's only one. Moreover, it can only be used once. If only I could use it more than once. Junior brother Xiao, what are you thinking about? Qian Diheng finally spoke. Hee, nothing, I just saw that senior brother Qian is always looking at me, I'm surprised. Xiaohua said with a smile. Qian Diheng grinned and scanned with his spirit sense. He frowned and said, this place is a bit desolate. I'm afraid we'll reach the Liqian mountain range a few hundred miles ahead. Let's take a rest first and discuss this. Afterwards, Qian Diheng waved his hand and landed on a bald peak first. Sun Shu and the others also landed. Kun Fian asked curiously, it's still early, is junior brother Qian going to rest again? We came out from Weeping Moon City's teleportation array and went through several teleportations. We just flew for a few days, how can I be tired? Qian Diheng raised his eyebrows and said unhappily, I'm at the late stage of Qi refining cultivation, I'm not as weak as before. Sun Shu looked around and said thoughtfully, this place is already close to the Liqian mountain range. And that's right. Xiaohua said with a smile, senior brother Qian wants to discuss something. Discuss what? Kun Fian asked curiously, just fly there directly. There are many spirit beasts in the Liqian mountain range, our cultivation. I'm afraid it's not enough. Xiaohua said. Sun Shu thought for a moment and shook his head slightly. If we take a detour, I'm afraid we won't have enough time to reach Jianghu City in time. According to it's better to fly there directly. That's right. We are here to travel in order to break through to the next realm. This kind of dangerous place is the best place for us to go. How can we take a detour? Kun Fian also raised his eyebrows and said, very excited. Xiaohua was silent, knowing that this was also a knot in the hearts of the three. He could only persuade in a low voice. Then we still need to discuss and find a suitable route. That's what I'm thinking. Qian Diheng said with a smile. Then the four of them sat down cross-legged and recovered their spiritual power. After the four of them rested for a while, Sun Shu discussed with Qian Diheng and Kun Fian for a while. Xiaohua understood that although the Liqian mountain range wasn't particularly big, it had a radius of tens of thousands of miles. There were many extremely fierce spirit beasts whose strength was comparable to foundation establishment, especially the spirit stones in the depths of the mountain range, which were more than gold core. Although they had to fly over the periphery of the Liqian mountain range, the spirit beasts there were much weaker, but it was still very difficult to pass through quietly. According to the sex records, in the direction of the Liqian mountain range, there are the most green pythons, which are first-grade spirit beasts, the same strength as us. Sun Shu had obviously done his homework and explained, however, green pythons usually live in groups. Hundreds and thousands of green pythons would give even foundation establishment masters a headache. The skin, bones, core and flesh of green pythons are all good things. Kun Fian's eyes shone. Snake venom can also be refined into antidote pills and poison pills. Qian Diheng also said. However, Sun Shu frowned, the problem is, we can't directly face hundreds of green pythons. Is there still a need to say? Qian Diheng laughed strangely and turned to look at Xiaohua. Our junior brother Zhao's flying speed is so fast, isn't it just right to use him to lure the snakes? No way. Xiaohua saw the three people looking at him with tacit understanding and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Junior brother Xiao will use you. Sun Shu covered his mouth and laughed. Who asked your flying speed to be the fastest among us? Moreover, you dared to go deep into the Liqian mountain range alone. It's the most beneficial for your state of mind and cultivation. Who knows, you might be able to find the opportunity to build your foundation in today's danger. Xiaohua thought for a moment and laughed. Fine, since I'm going to lure the snakes, then? How do we calculate the share? You stingy brat. Qian Diheng heard and immediately had a look of disdain. You haven't even started to work and you're already bargaining. Really not enough. However, just as his voice fell, Qian Diheng blinked his eyes and said, How about this? You've done a meritorious deed by luring the snakes. You can get 20% more of the things after killing the green pythons. Deal. Xiaohua was very happy, as if he had gotten a great bargain. Strange, no matter how I look at it, it seems as if I've fallen into a trap. Qian Diheng was rather puzzled. Kun Fian rolled his eyes at him and said, Junior brother Xiao is so benevolent. If you don't give him more points, how could he not go? What he means is that he wants to pick first, right? Junior brother Xiao, is it like this? Qian Diheng pulled Xiaohua's Taoist robe and said. Xiaohua's face was serious. The green python's skin is a refining material, the more the better. Xiaohua previously didn't think that the remains of spirit beasts could be used to refine tools, so he didn't calculate before. Now that he understood, how could he give up? Alright, since we finished our discussion and have divided our work, we'll go and kill the green pythons. Sun Shu smiled like a flower, as if the green pythons with refining qi cultivation were already in her bag. Chapter 1718. The Liqian mountain range looked very desolate from afar, but when he got closer, Xiaohua discovered that under the rough mountain rocks and sand, there was a thin layer of vegetation. It was just that this vegetation was not green, and was similar to the color of the surrounding mountain rocks, making it difficult to distinguish with the naked eye. Moreover, there was a kind of short tree on the mountain ridge. This tree was only about 2 zhang tall, but its trunk was thick. It needed more than 10 people to hug it. Xiaohua did not fly high, nor was his speed fast. He only released his divine sense and flew towards the depths of Liqian mountain range. Didn't you say we would pass through Liqian mountain range? How come we haven't even arrived yet and they're already thinking about the green pythons? Is this for experience or to accumulate spirit stones? Xiaohua flew for several li before coming to a realization. Sun Shu and the others had made it clear that the green pythons were extremely fast, and many of them could fly. Xiaohua only needed to lure no more than 4 green pythons out of the group, and the 4 of them were confident that they could kill them all. Is there a need for 4 people? With this young master's cloud-suppressing seal, won't these green pythons be in the bag? Xiaohua did not put these green pythons in his eyes. After flying for a while, the mountain range below them changed a little. It gradually became moist and a slight fishy wind rose in the air. Xiaohua frowned, knowing that the place where the green pythons lived was not far away. Could it be here? In his divine sense, a few li ahead was a place where the trees were slightly lush. A thick fog covered the forest and the ground was covered with grayish-white vegetation. However, this vegetation was worn bare, which was obviously the reason why the pythons often appeared. When he flew closer, Xiaohua's figure landed and used his hand to pinch his chin, thinking about how to lure the snakes. At this moment, a few ear-piercing screams came from the fog. There are other cultivators? Xiaohua was surprised and swept his divine sense, but when he saw the situation in the fog, he could not help but be surprised. At the edge of the fog, there were 4 or 5 people in martial arts clothes, holding different weapons in their hands. Some were swords, some were sabers, and some were spears. They were surrounding a 3 zhang long snake and were engaged in a life and death struggle. The snake's body was dark green and was 3 feet thick. On the snake's head, which was larger than an ox's head, there were 2 snake eyes emitting a cold light. Behind the snake, on the ground not far away, there were more than 10 skeletal corpses, each of them missing an arm or a leg. It was a tragic sight. Just as Xiaohua was watching, the long snake hissed and spat out a mouthful of faint mist that sprinkled on the heads of the 2 people in front of him. The two people's faces were filled with panic, but they didn't seem to be able to take out any yellow talismans. Instead, they waved their hands and struck the air with their palms. Every time they struck, they seemed to be able to disperse some of the mist. But in the end, there was too much mist, and a lot of it landed on their bodies and faces. Another series of blood-curdling screams could be heard. As soon as the two men's skin came into contact with the mist, small blisters immediately appeared on their skin. Following that, wisps of white smoke rose from their bodies. It was obvious that they were in extreme pain. The two men could not help but throw away the saber and spear in their hands. They stretched out their hands to scratch at the blisters. However, the moment they did so, their entire skin was torn apart. Black blood flowed from their faces and necks. Just as the two people screamed and fell to the ground, the snake curled its tail and swept the two people on the left, who were somewhat dazed, to the ground. Immediately, blood spurted out from the two people's mouths. It was obvious they were dead. The two people's swords and spears were simply unable to block the attack of the snake's tail. The four people died extremely quickly. Xiaohua simply did not have time to make a move. However, seeing the methods of the five people, a thought emerged in Xiaohua's mind. These people are not cultivators. Sure enough, there was only one person left. Seeing that his companions had died, how could he dare to stay? He put away the sword in his hand, spread his body, and fled towards the outside of the thick fog. This is Qinggong? Xiaohua saw that person's feet were nimble and his body was as light as a swallow, and couldn't help but groan. He thought of the identity he sometimes used to dodge cultivators' attacks. Naturally, in Xiaohua's eyes, this person's movement technique was full of flaws and abnormally clumsy. Hiss! How could the snake let this person escape? The snake's head swayed, and its entire body swayed. Unexpectedly, it was not slower than that person's Qinggong as it chased after him. That person's face was pale. He simply didn't dare to look behind him. He lowered his head and ran toward Xiaohua. Just as that person came out of the thick fog, the snake behind him had already caught up. The snake's scarlet tongue was about to bite that person's back. Suddenly, the shadow of a sword flashed past that person's ear. That person was so frightened that his legs went soft and he fell to the ground, paralyzed. Pa! The snake hissed. Immediately, the man saw the thick snake tail sweep over his head and hit the thick tree next to him. The thick tree was broken by the snake with a kacha sound. The tree fell to the ground with a boom sound, and the long snake's tail was pressed down on the ground. The snake's tail moved a few times, as if it wanted to move but was unable to. Soon after, it stopped moving. That person was clearly stunned. Immediately after, he looked at the snake's head behind him in disbelief. He saw that the snake's head had already been smashed to pieces. On the ground next to the snake's head, the sword embryo of a long sword lay there, stained with blood. Which hero saved this humble one? That person clearly understood. He rolled and crawled up, cupped his hands and shouted. Not far away, on top of a tree, Xiaohua crossed his arms and looked at this person with interest. That person's gaze fell on Xiaohua's young face. It was quite inconceivable. He bowed and said, "This humble one is Zhang Xuang of Southern Wind. I wonder which of the 5 immortals of Wulin is the benefactor who saved this humble one?" The 5 immortals of Wulin? Xiaohua's eyes turned. His figure floated down from the tree. He didn't use the slightest bit of transcendence energy, only the misty steps. 8 steps hurrying the wind? Zhang Xuang saw Xiaohua's Qinggong and immediately showed astonishment. He said, "The benefactor is Southern Wind Su Bingyi?" But then Zhang Xuang shook his head and said, "Great Hero Su is an old man in his 60s. Could it be that the benefactor is a descendant of Great Hero Su?" Hee. Xiaohua laughed and put away the great wisdom sword. Soon after, his divine sense swept and said, "This is not a place to stay for long. Come with me." Saying this, Xiaohua pulled Zhang Xuang. Still using the Qinggong technique, he quickly brought him to a place. After waiting for Xiaohua for a while, several green pythons that were clearly much larger than this long snake rushed over. They circled around the long snake's corpse for a long time. Soon after, they ate the several people's corpses and dragged the long snake's corpse back into the forest. Chapter 1719. Benefactor's Qinggong is truly superb. You have really broadened my horizons. On top of a mountain, Zhang Shuyang said with admiration, Su Bingyi's 8 steps chasing the wind is comparable to Benefactor's. Benefactor, please bestow a name. I am a nameless person in the forest. Even if I say my name, Zhang Daxia wouldn't know. Xiaohua waved his hand and said, who would have thought that Zhang Shuyang would turn over and kowtow and said, Benefactor saved my life, how can I not remember Benefactor's name? If so, wouldn't I be worse than a pig or a dog? How can I stand in the martial arts world? This. Xiaohua slightly shook his head. I am Xiaohua. Benefactor Xiaohua. Zhang Shuyang was helped up by Xiaohua. He shed tears of gratitude and said, with Benefactor Zhao's skills, even if you are in the wild forest, you should be famous in Jianghu. How? I have never heard of your name? I still haven't traveled Jianghu. Xiaohua said with a smile. He said Jianghu very smoothly. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. After today, I will proclaim Benefactor Zhao's righteousness in Jianghu. Moreover, Benefactor Xiao will follow me back. Within a few months, everyone in Jianghu will hear of Benefactor Zhao's name. Zhang Shuyang patted his chest and said, how could Xiaohua travel Jianghu? He just wanted to know how he knew Qinggong, so he said with a smile, traveling Jianghu is not urgent. I will first understand the situation in Jianghu. How about it? Of course, what does Benefactor want to know? Zhang Shuyang asked in agreement. What? Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said with a smile, then tell me about the 5 immortals of Wulin. Benefactor, these 5 immortals of Wulin are all pre-celestial masters. East Thunder, West Rain, South Wind, North Fire, Yin and Yang are called the 5 immortals of Wulin. East Thunder is Lei Huming, his thunder body technique is complete, ordinary weapons can't hurt him. West Rain is Water Jade Graceful, her Morning Wind Rain internal energy has been cultivated to perfection, there are few opponents in Jianghu. South Wind Su Bingyi's 8 steps chasing the wind is the number 1 Qinggong in Jianghu. Oh, now that Benefactor has set foot in Jianghu, his title of number 1 will be in danger. Go on. Xiaohua smiled. West Fire is Ma Ming. His fire dragon divine art is invincible. Other than Wang Chong who can restrain him, others can only fight to a draw with him. Then why is Wang Chong called Zhong Yin Yang? Benefactor, please know that these 5 heroes are located in 5 different directions. Wang Chong is proficient in the 9 Yin and 9 Yang divine arts, so he is located in the middle. Moreover, his martial arts are the highest, so he is known as the central Yin Yang. I see. When Xiaohua heard this, he didn't seem to recall anything. Instead, he became even more confused. This was a world that had nothing to do with him. Oh, by the way, Benefactor Xiao, do you always live here? Or are you going to the Luofeng mountain to participate in the sword conference? Seeing Xiaohua frown, Zhang Shuyang hurriedly said, I wanted to participate in the sword conference, so I remembered that Qingyang Mountain has a snake gallbladder that can increase internal strength. So I boldly invited a few friends to come and try my luck, but in the end, Luofeng Mountain Sword Conference? Xiaohua asked curiously, is it a very famous sword conference in Jianghu? It seems that Benefactor is really not a person of Jianghu. Zhang Shuyang grinned and said, the Luofeng Mountain Sword Conference will be held in Luofeng Mountain in 2 months. It is a sword conference that only happens once every 10 years. The 5 immortals of Wulin were ranked 10 years ago, and this year is the sword conference. I don't know if the 5 immortals' name will be shaken by others. By the way, Benefactor Xiao, if you go, you will definitely be ranked among the 5 immortals. Where is Luofeng Mountain? Xiaohua's heart was moved. This Zhang Shuyang can't say anything. Maybe he can get something from those Xiantian masters, and maybe it is related to his life. When Zhang Shuyang said it, Xiaohua was even more happy. This Luofeng Mountain is actually on his way to Mingxi. At this time, there is still a long time until 2 months. If he wants to go, he can definitely go. Hero Zhang, can you show me your sex martial arts? Xiao Hua hesitated and somewhat pleaded. This. Zhang Shuyang also hesitated, but then he smiled and said, Benefactor Zhao's Qin Gong is profound. Although I have not seen Benefactor's martial arts, but just by looking at the leopard through a tube, I can tell that you must be a peerless master. I am really showing off my slight skill in front of an expert. But then, Zhang Shuyang changed the topic. Although my sex martial arts cannot be taught to outsiders, but in front of Benefactor, there is nothing to hide. It is only right that I show you. Thank you for your trouble, Hero Zhang. Xiao Hua understood in his heart, but he still wanted to see if the so-called martial arts could evoke his memory, so he had to bite the bullet and say it. Benefactor, please look. Zhang Shuyang cupped his fists and then started to display his martial arts moves one by one. At first, Xiao Hua was watching with great interest, but the more he watched, the more he frowned. Not to mention that these moves were full of flaws. There were many times when they could obviously attack in the air, but they chose to attack from the side. There was obviously a flaw that could be made up for with a method, but they didn't. Moreover, these moves, in Xiao Hua's eyes, didn't seem to have any reaction. It was as if he was watching a child baring his fangs and brandishing his claws while playing. Alas, the moves of the martial arts world are nothing more than the realm that secular people pursue. How can they be compared with cultivators? Xiao Hua was disappointed, but he suddenly smiled. If you can attack in the air, then you must be in midair. How can secular people fly? Even aura-refining cultivators have to use flying talismans, right? The two can't be mentioned in the same breath. While Zhang Shuyang was practicing, he peeked at Xiao Hua's expression. When he saw Xiao Hua's disappointed face, he became even more fearful. He knew that his martial arts weren't in Xiao Hua's eyes. After he concealed his martial arts moves, he said very respectfully, Benefactor Xiao, this humble one's insignificant martial arts won't be able to enter Benefactor's discerning eyes. I've let Benefactor see a joke. It's nothing. It's very good. Xiao Hua quickly waved his hand and said, I wonder what kind of inner strength cultivation method Benefactor is practicing? Zhang Shuyang tried to ask. Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and scratched his head with his hand. He had a plan in his heart and said with a smile, This humble one doesn't know what I'm practicing. I only know some random moves. How about this humble one demonstrate some of them? Hero Zhang, can you help me take a look? That's naturally good. This humble one will wait and see. Zhang Shuyang was overjoyed. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and his hands and feet began to move. Some vague and scattered moves were slowly displayed. Unfortunately, these moves weren't coherent. Some were even displayed halfway and forgotten. Seeing this, Zhang Shuyang's face was full of embarrassment. He didn't know how to evaluate. This humble one only remembers so much. Xiao Hua withdrew his hands and feet. With a face full of expectation, he asked, I wonder what Hero Zhang can see? This. Zhang Shuyang shook his head slightly. Benefactor Zhao's moves are really broad and profound. The implication is far from what this humble one can guess. This humble one doesn't dare to evaluate. Hero Zhang, don't flatter this humble one. Xiao Hua waved his hand and asked, Hero Zhang has been in Jianghu for many years. Have you ever seen a move similar to this humble one's? At this point, Zhang Shuyang's eyes lit up and he said with a smile, If Benefactor didn't mention it, this humble one really couldn't remember. Benefactor's moves seem to be somewhat similar to Eastern Thunder's Lei Huming's Thunder Body technique. However, the moves are still quite different. Of course, this humble one's martial arts is far inferior to Eastern Thunder's. Maybe I remember wrongly. Great. Xiao Hua beamed with joy. Maybe this humble one's master is related to Eastern Thunder? That should be the case. Zhang Shuyang said with a smile. If Benefactor has a relationship with Eastern Thunder, this Jianghu is huge. Will Eastern Thunder's Lei Huming also participate in the Luofeng Mountain Sword Conference? Of course, this once-in-a-decade sword conference is famous all over the world. Eastern Thunder will definitely go. If Benefactor Xiao doesn't mind, this humble one is willing to serve you and take you to Luofeng Mountain. Hee, this humble one has other things to do. Luofeng Mountain? Let's talk about it after the other things are done. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Zhang Xiang was anxious. Benefactor Xiao, Luofeng Mountain is very far from here. Although we martial arts people have Qinggong, it's about right for us to rush there from Qingyang Mountain. If Benefactor Xiao goes to do other things first, I'm afraid it'll be too late to go to Luofeng Mountain. It doesn't matter, this humble one naturally has a plan. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said with a smile, Hero Zhang, you'd better hurry. This place is dangerous, it's not good to stay for long. Benefactor Xiao won't follow me down the mountain? Zhang Shuyang asked with disappointment. I won't go, let's part ways here. Xiao Hua smiled and also cupped his fists. After saluting Zhang Shuyang, he went in another direction and used his Qinggong. Seeing Xiao Hua leave like smoke, Zhang Shuyang sighed with emotion. I don't know which sect this unworldly expert is from. He's so humble and has such great martial arts. Even Wang Chong, who is known as the world's #1 expert, can't compare to him. It's a pity that I can't make friends with him, it's really a pity. Then, Zhang Shuyang hurriedly used his Qinggong and left in another direction. Xiao Hua went to a place where Zhang Shuyang couldn't see. His divine sense saw that he had left, so he turned around and flew toward the green python. He didn't expect to see another world here, a martial arts world, a Jianghu. It was the first time Xiao Hua heard of this Jianghu, but it was so familiar, as if he himself came from Jianghu. Could it be, before I lost my memory, before I was rescued by my master to Yellow Flower Ridge, I was a Jianghu person? The reason I lost my memory was because I encountered something in Jianghu? The more Xiao Hua thought about it, the more likely it was. After all, Xiao Hua didn't cultivate. Moreover, his body was light and strong, and he knew some martial arts moves. Wasn't this the characteristic of a Jianghu person that Zhang Shuyang mentioned? The Luofeng Mountain Sword Conference is a grand event for Jianghu people. Presumably, all the Jianghu people with backgrounds will participate. If I came from Jianghu, as long as I appeared on Luofeng Mountain, someone would definitely recognize me. However, I'm afraid I can't let Qian Diheng and the others know about this. Chapter 1720. When Xiao Hua arrived at the place where he killed the azure python, he only saw blood and some bones on the ground. Nothing else could be seen. This azure python is indeed powerful. In just a short while, other azure pythons came over. I don't know what Zhang Shuyang and the others were thinking. They dared to come to Li Qian Mountain Range with such insignificant skills? In their mouths, it's just Green Sun Mountain. Xiao Hua sighed inwardly. He clapped his hands and took out some defensive yellow talismans. Then he flew into the thick fog. There was an extremely fishy smell in the thick fog. The trees and vegetation in the fog were all corroded into a different appearance. Xiao Hua's body was covered in a layer of faint brilliance that protected him. All the poisonous gas and water couldn't get close to him. Ouch! Xiao Hua's divine sense passed through. He had already seen that the mountain range ahead was even more continuous. Those thick trees were also even denser. Many streams also began to appear. In these places covered by the thick fog, many azure pythons of various sizes filled the area. So many azure pythons. Xiao Hua was really flabbergasted. Not only were there 3 zhang-long pythons swimming or resting on the trees, there were also many huge azure pythons lying on the mountain range. When Xiao Hua was about to use his divine sense to scan the depths, many emotionless and cold divine senses also emerged from the depths of the mountain range and directly welcomed him. There were even dozens of divine senses that were even more powerful than Xiao Hua's divine sense. This is bad. Xiao Hua was alarmed. He knew that he had alarmed the azure pythons inside and immediately withdrew his divine sense. Following his divine sense, more than 10 huge shadows actually flew out from the depths of the mountain range. Looking at their speed, they were actually a bit faster than refinement realm cultivators. I was wondering why Qian Diheng and the others didn't dare to rashly come over. It turns out I can't use my divine sense too much. Xiao Hua promptly released his Buddhist sense, but as before, the azure pythons were actually more powerful than cultivators. They very easily discovered Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense and flew towards Xiao Hua's direction. Spiritual beings are indeed spiritual beings. They are naturally more sensitive than cultivators. Xiao Hua no longer dared to be careless. He formed hand seals and his body sank into the ground. Fortunately, the green azure python's divine sense scanned the area mercilessly and couldn't find any trace of Xiao Hua. It flew around for a moment before flying back. On the ground, hundreds and thousands of green azure pythons of various sizes quickly swam over and then quickly followed the green azure python back. Xiao Hua didn't dare to release his divine sense again. He fled underground for a while before sneaking his head out. Fortunately, Xiao Hua was in a bright place and there weren't any green pythons. However, there were a lot of sparkling water threads on the plants on the ground, making Xiao Hua feel nauseous. Xiao Hua carefully released his divine sense bit by bit. He saw that around 10 green pythons were coiled around a boulder 10 zhang away. These green pythons were clearly 10 times larger than the one Xiao Hua had killed. Outside their huge scales, there was already a faint mist. Moreover, the moment Xiao Hua's divine sense touched these green pythons, they immediately sensed it. They abruptly raised their snake heads, and their fist-sized snake eyes emitted a cold light as they looked in Xiao Hua's direction. "Granny, these are not to be trifled with." Xiao Hua formed an incantation gesture, and his figure flashed into a large tree on the left. However, just as his figure disappeared, there was another flash of brilliance, and he retreated from inside. As it turned out, this large tree was actually hollow, and there were extremely many tiny green pythons wandering around. Although these didn't affect Xiao Hua's would escape, Xiao Hua really couldn't see these densely packed little insects. After searching for a while, Xiao Hua found 6 green pythons under a mountain ridge. These green pythons were only 60 to 70 zhang long. Moreover, when Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over, it didn't attract their attention. Obviously, they didn't produce divine sense. Presumably, their strength was around the 11th layer of qi refining. "Forget it, I'll take them." Xiao Hua made up his mind and drilled out from the ground. First, he thought of a way to escape. Then, he released the black iron needle and stabbed it towards one of the green pythons. Although the green python's skin was sturdy, it couldn't compare to the black iron needle. This stab naturally aroused the green python's vigilance. Immediately, the green python's head stood up from the ground. The scarlet snake's tongue flicked rapidly, and the snake's eyes swept left and right. With a zing sound, the black iron needle once again pierced towards the green python's left eye. That green python was very agile. It slightly shook its head and actually easily dodged the black iron needle. Amazing! Xiao Hua secretly sighed. He controlled the black iron needle to slide on the green python's skin. See la la, a burst of tiny sparks flashed. This time, the python's skin didn't suffer any damage. However, as the black iron needle flew back, the green python was clearly somewhat angry. With a "si" sound, that green python hissed and chased after the needle. At the same time, the other pythons also swam over. "It's really fast." Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly used Earth Escape while controlling the black iron needle to retreat according to the path he just took. However, before he could even travel halfway, that green python actually stopped and prepared to return. How could Xiao Hua let them return? The black iron needle once again flew over and directly pierced another green python's vital point. Although it didn't kill that green python, it thoroughly angered it. With a "si" sound, that green python chased after the black iron needle without regard for anything else. Xiao Hua was overjoyed and hurriedly fled back. Along the way, the 6 or 7 green pythons encountered several groups of green pythons that were resting. Although the majority of the green pythons looked strangely at the few green pythons that quickly left and didn't pay them any attention, there were also a few green pythons that seemed to like liveliness that joined in. When Xiao Hua used Earth Escape to the edge of the dense fog, there were already close to 20 green pythons in the group. No wonder Qian Diheng and the others didn't come to lure the snakes. If this young master didn't know Earth Escape, wouldn't this young master have been discovered by many green pythons along the way? Xiaohua gradually understood that when faced with so many green pythons that had strength similar to a Qi refining stage 12 cultivator, other than being able to escape with speed, it was really hard to say. After coming out of the thick fog, the azure pythons were somewhat hesitant. Xiaohua could only fly out of the ground and throw a small ice thorn talisman at them. Without making too much noise, it angered many azure pythons. There were even 2 azure pythons that could float in the air that chased at the front while shaking their heads and wagging their tails. Haha, 3 senior martial brothers, hurry up and make your move. Xiaohua immediately shouted loudly after luring 20 green pythons into the previously agreed-upon area. Sun Shu and the others had already used their divine sense to see, and each of them revealed themselves. Qian Diheng shouted loudly, "Junior martial brother Xiao, I told you to lure the snakes, why did you lure so many? These green pythons all have strength around Qi refining stage 11. If even one of them escapes, our plan will be ruined." Chapter 1721. Qian Diheng's words sounded like he was complaining about Xiaohua, but his tone was filled with excitement. Qian Diheng himself knew how difficult it was to attract 20 green pythons without a sound. Moreover, these green pythons were only around the 11th layer of Qi refining. Although there were many of them, it wasn't difficult for them. After all, the 4 disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect could fly, and these green pythons could only float in the air at most. They couldn't pose any threat to them, and the biggest possibility was that the 4 of them couldn't kill all of these green pythons, and let some of these green pythons escape, attracting more green pythons. Then, the benefits they could obtain would be much less. You can use your methods. This little brother guarantees that none of these green pythons will escape. Xiaohua laughed loudly, his figure flashing, passing by the group of green pythons and appearing behind the green pythons. These green pythons clearly had some intelligence. When they saw the 3 cultivators appear in front of them, they immediately split into 4 groups, hissing, spitting their tongues and rushing towards the 4 of them. Kun Fian's artifact was a string of jade beads. It was called the thunder trapping bead. She flew in the air and tossed out the thunder trapping bead. Instantly, it expanded and a brilliant ball of light enveloped the 4 green pythons that were swimming over. The green pythons' eyes reflected the brilliance of the thunder trapping bead, but they didn't seem to be moved, and didn't have any fear at all. These 4 green pythons simultaneously raised their heads from the ground, straightening half of their bodies. They were about 40 to 50 feet tall, not much lower than Kun Fian's flying height. Hiss! The pythons opened their mouths at the same time, and countless stinking poisonous fog sprayed out, enveloping the shining thunder-trapping bead. Quick! Kun Fian saw this, and instead of being shocked, she was happy. Forming a spell, she pointed her finger, and the thunder-trapping bead produced a strong suction force, and in the blink of an eye, the thick poisonous fog was sucked in completely. Kun Fian knew that this poisonous fog was the poison of the green pythons. It was extremely poisonous, and was one of the benefits they wanted on this trip. After the 4 green pythons finished spitting out the poisonous mist, they were not as listless as other ordinary poisonous snakes. Instead, they were even more excited. Their entire bodies twisted, and their snake tails, which were nearly 4 zhang long, whipped towards the thunder-trapping bead with lightning speed. The incomparably hard python skin struck the thunder-trapping beads, causing the light on the thunder-trapping beads to flicker a little. Then, the beads actually sank down a foot or so from midair. This green python was indeed powerful. Not only are they strong, but their skin is also tough. If my thunder-trapping bead wasn't supported by a formation, it would have been broken by them. Kun Fian was shocked at the strength of the azure pythons, but he was also glad. These pythons were only 10 feet long, and were obviously not the strongest among the azure pythons. And since the azure pythons' tails were able to move the thunder confining pearl, then their python skin would naturally be good stuff. Kun Fian took a deep breath, and once again activated his Fa Li, raising up the thunder-trapping beads that had been struck down. Once again, they let out light, and the 4 azure pythons once again spat out the poisonous mist. Sun Shu's magic tool was similar to Kun Fian's. It was called the Thunder Lock, and its shape was a small lock. Under the activation of his Fa Li, it was about a foot long. It also had a suction force, and could also use the power of lightning. After absorbing the poisonous mist spat out by the azure pythons, Sun Shu rubbed his hands together, pouring his Fa Li into it. From the Thunder Lock, a bolt of lightning suddenly flashed out, striking the python that was floating in midair. The strong power of lightning struck the 10-foot-long azure python down from midair, and a burst of green smoke came out from the python. That azure python writhed on the ground for a moment, but did not move. When the other azure pythons saw this, they immediately had the intention to retreat. As their tails twitched, they quickly swam towards the direction of the dense fog. Sun Shu frowned, and with a clap of his hand, several ice seal talismans appeared, and with a wave of his hand he sent them towards the azure pythons. Who knew that the azure pythons could actually sense the movement of the yellow talismans? Before the ice seal talismans hit them, they each swung their tails. Pa pa pa, sounds rang out, and the yellow talismans were actually smashed into pieces, turning into talisman papers that fell to the ground. This is troublesome. When Sun Shu saw this, he threw out another handful of confinement talismans. This time, some of the azure pythons used their tails, some turned their heads, and spat out a mouthful of poisonous mist. When the poisonous mist landed on the light of the confinement talismans, it was like pouring cold water on a flame, corroding the light and turning it into broken talisman papers that fell to the ground. Truly powerful. Sun Shu was a bit flabbergasted. Even the ice seal talismans and confinement talismans were not afraid. This really was the strength of the 11th layer of Qi refining. At this moment, her lightning lock had already flown over. Sun Shu's hand seal had already been completed, and he pointed his finger again. Kaka, 2 crisp sounds rang out, and 2 bolts of lightning appeared from the lightning lock, striking 2 of the azure pythons and killing them. The remaining 2 pythons quickly rushed towards Xiaohua, who was wrapping up the tail. When Xiaohua flew to the tail of the azure pythons, there were already 6 azure pythons chasing after him. Among them were the 2 azure pythons that were angered by Xiaohua just now. Unfortunately, Xiaohua did not have Kun Fian's lightning trap pearl. When he saw the azure python spitting out poisonous mist, he knew that it was poison. However, there was no way to collect it, so he could only flash away, dodging the poisonous mist. Fortunately, the azure pythons had a limited amount of poison. After spitting a few times, they used their tails to attack. Xiaohua did not take out any magic tools, and only used his martial arts that seemed to be a light body technique. Twisting and turning in the shadows of the snake tails, he seemed to be the most relaxed. Seeing Xiaohua so frivolous, the 6 azure pythons became even more anxious, and their tails twitched even more vigorously. From time to time, they even used their stinking snake mouths to move closer, wanting to swallow Xiaohua in one bite. Junior brother Xiao, be careful. In the distance, Sun Shu saw that 1 azure python on his side was fleeing, and Qian Diheng's side was even worse. Unexpectedly, 2 pythons had also fled, and he couldn't help but hurriedly shout, "Damn it, if I don't show my power, you guys think I'm a sick cat." Xiaohua cursed, and with a clap of his hand, the cloud-suppressing seal flew out from his body. While countless amounts of heaven and earth spiritual qi poured into the cloud-suppressing seal, a yellow light scattered from the cloud-suppressing seal, covering the 9 azure pythons. Suddenly, the pressure of the magic treasure heavily hit the azure pythons. The azure pythons were suppressed to the point that they couldn't move, and the negative karma that came from the cloud-suppressing seal was like the nemesis of the heavens, causing the azure pythons to feel an irresistible fear. It was as if they were hibernating, dead still and motionless. Junior brother Xiao, how come you didn't kill a single azure python? Sun Shu asked curiously. Hee, I don't know where to start. Xiaohua giggled. This python's skin is obviously a good thing. Wouldn't it be a pity if it was damaged? The azure python's 7 inches is the weakest, and killing the azure pythons is also done from there. Sun Shu covered his mouth and laughed. Good. Xiao Hua nodded, and with a wave of his hand, the great wisdom sword appeared in his hand. Using the heavenly staff technique, a row of afterimages of the great wisdom sword streaked across, and in the blink of an eye, each of the 9 azure pythons had a fist-sized hole in their 7 inches. Seeing the snake blood gushing out, Sun Shu hurriedly waved his hand, and the thunder lock flew into the air and absorbed the snake blood. Xiao Hua rubbed his head and put away the cloud-suppressing seal, and said with a smile, "Junior brother doesn't have a magic treasure to collect the snake blood, and the poison from before is also a waste. This azure python's poison is very powerful, and ordinary magic arts can't be used, and if you're not careful, you might even injure yourself, so you can only rely on magic treasures to collect it." Sun Shu nodded, thought for a moment, and clapped his hand, taking out a small jade bottle, and handed it over with a smile. "I said, this is a magic treasure that I used in my early years, called Yuning. It can collect and store water-like things, but because I received the Thunderlock from Master, I haven't used it for many years. If junior brother Xiao needs it, please accept it." Thank you, senior sister Sun." Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He took the Yuning and the refined jade slip and put it into his space. At the same time, he clapped his hand, took out the hemp dust, and handed it over with a smile. "Senior sister Sun, it's impolite to exchange gifts. This is junior brother's magic treasure, called hemp dust, an earth-type magic treasure. Junior brother is very comfortable with the cloud-suppressing seal, so I'll exchange this thing with senior sister." "That's not appropriate." A trace of disappointment flashed through Sun Shu's eyes, and she hurriedly waved his hand. "Although the cloud-suppressing seal is powerful, it's still a magic treasure. You're an aura-refining cultivator. How can the magic power in your body support the cloud-suppressing seal for a long time? I've also seen you use this hemp dust, and it's very powerful. If you give it to me, what will you use? Let's wait until you've advanced to the foundation establishment stage in the future, and after you've obtained a better magic treasure, then we'll talk about it again." This. Xiao Hua saw Sun Shu's resolute refusal and could only smile. Since it's like this, junior brother will accept senior sister's kindness. In the future, when junior brother has any good magic treasure in his hands, junior brother will ask senior sister to speak, and junior brother will definitely give it to you. How can magic treasures be good? No matter what, it has to be a magic treasure. Sun Shu blinked and said. Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and said with a smile, "Senior sister is right. If it's not a magic treasure, junior brother will be too embarrassed to speak in the future." But these are all junior brother Zhao's methods? A cry of surprise came from afar, and that cry of surprise was very exaggerated. This person was naturally Qian Diheng, who had just finished dealing with the 2 green pythons. Of course, I didn't think that the incomparably strong, coarse skin and thick flesh of the green pythons would be so weak in junior brother Zhao's hands. Following that was Kun Fian's voice, and her voice really did contain traces of jealousy. She had tasted the green python's methods of breaking through with brute force, and the thunder confining bead had been whipped by the green pythons several times, and had lost quite a bit of her Fa Li. Although she didn't see Xiao Hua kill the green pythons, but looking at the 9 green pythons on the ground, she naturally knew that Xiao Hua had easily killed them. Excuse me. Xiao Hua rubbed his nose and said, "Let's first take care of these green pythons, then talk about it." Alright. Qian Diheng liked to harvest the most, and said with a smile, "Our methods of taking care of the green pythons are still not enough. Why don't we just directly divide these up, and if we can return to the Imperial Thunder Sect or some other gathering, we can let others take care of them." Chapter 1722. Qian Diheng's words were extremely true. Professional matters should be done by professional cultivators. Although Xiao Hua knew how to refine pills, he didn't necessarily have to refine all the pills himself. Many pills could be traded with spirit stones. Moreover, Sun Shu and the other two roughly knew what materials could be used on the Azure Python's body. If it was damaged, wouldn't their efforts be wasted? According to the previous agreement, Xiaohua took an extra 20%. Everyone divided the green python's corpse, then looked at Xiaohua. Xiaohua rubbed his nose, sighed, and once again flew towards the area where the thick fog was. Like this, Xiaohua attracted another 40 to 50 Azure Pythons. However, the more he went, the more powerful the Azure Pythons were. Moreover, their numbers also seemed to have increased. Aside from Xiaohua using the cloud-suppressing seal to deter the group of pythons, Qian Diheng and the other two were somewhat powerless. On the fourth time, Xiaohua finally hit a snag. He actually attracted the attention of 3 Foundation Establishment green pythons. These 3 green pythons were different from the other green pythons. Their bodies were shockingly large, several hundred feet long. Moreover, on their enormous bodies, there were 4 palm-sized wings. These 3 green pythons flew in the air. Not only were they supported by a faint black mist, but when they flashed their wings, they weren't any worse than Xiaohua's usual flying technique. Seeing the 3 huge Azure Pythons, Xiaohua's first reaction wasn't fear. Instead, he thought of the little white dragon he met a long time ago at Yellow Flower Ridge. Sigh, Little White was also a python. Moreover, it was about to transform into a dragon, but it was killed by the heavenly tribulation. They are all pythons. Look at Little White, so cute. Why are these Azure Pythons more and more disgusting? Xiaohua saw the 3 Azure Pythons fly out from a hidden place and unconsciously curled his lips. At this moment, the 3 Azure Pythons seemed to have a tacit understanding. Among them, 2 of the huge pythons swayed their tails and flew behind Xiaohua, blocking Xiaohua's path. In addition to the previous one, these 3 Azure Pythons actually blocked him from 3 different directions in the mountain forest. These 3 Azure Pythons' intelligence is not low. Xiaohua was immediately shocked, and his heart was secretly on guard. Hiss! The 3 Azure Pythons hissed at the same time. A kind of aura similar to pressure came from the 3 Azure Pythons. Pressure. This is an Azure Python with the strength of a Foundation Establishment stage cultivator. Xiaohua was horrified. Although this kind of pressure from a high-level cultivator towards a low-level cultivator was not as skillful, it still caused Xiaohua to feel a burst of fear from the bottom of his heart. I'm afraid I'll have to try using the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiaohua didn't think of running away when facing the 3 green pythons. Instead, he coveted them. First, he clapped his hand, summoning out Jingchen. An earthen yellow light enveloped him from the top of his head. Then, Xiaohua's divine sense swept over, wanting to see which green python he should start with. Woo 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 woo, 3 muffled sounds could be heard. The 3 green pythons opened their mouths at the same time. A green wind blade was formed from the 3 pythons' mouths, rapidly spinning as it flew towards Xiaohua. Oh my, it's not poisonous fog. Xiaohua was shocked again. His figure swayed and flew between the 3 green pythons, wanting to dodge the wind blade. How could he have known that the wind blade was condensed from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth? It was even more powerful than ordinary magic tools. Moreover, under the urging of the green python's divine sense, how could Xiaohua easily dodge it? After barely dodging a few times, a wind blade brushed past Xiaohua's back, breaking the defensive yellow talisman on Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua clenched his teeth. With a wave of his hand, he took out the great wisdom sword from the space. With a clap of his hand, the cloud-suppressing seal was once again raised in midair. Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal reveal the might of a magic tool, tumbling in midair, the 3 green pythons seemed to know how powerful it was. For the time being, they ignored Xiaohua and each spat out a wind blade to attack the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiaohua's eyes revealed a cold light. He formed a seal and poured his magic power into the cloud-suppressing seal. He pointed his finger, and the cloud-suppressing seal, carrying a bronze luster, smashed towards one of the green pythons. Woo woo woo! That green python spat out wind blades with all its might, continuously hitting the bottom of the cloud-suppressing seal. The other 2 green pythons also helped. A dozen wind blades actually stopped the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiao Hua poured his magic power into it, but he was unable to smash it down for a moment. "Watch this, young master!" Xiao Hua shouted loudly. His figure flew, and he quickly brandished the great wisdom sword, stabbing towards the nearest green python's vital point. Pop! A huge green shadow flashed by. This green python's tail was like a mountain as it smashed forward, blocking the front of the great wisdom sword. The scales on this green python's body were at least a foot long. When the great wisdom sword struck them, sparks flew. A fist-sized dent appeared on the scales. However, it was still unable to pierce through the scales. Hiss! That green python seemed to be in pain. When it hissed, the python's painful tail flipped again. With a bang, it hit the cloud-suppressing seal that was still tumbling in midair. The cloud-suppressing seal was tilted, as expected of Foundation establishment strength. Formidable. Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed. Just as he was about to spit out the great wisdom sword, a cold and gloomy divine sense ruthlessly swept over from the distance. Not good, there's an even more formidable one. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. These 3 green pythons with Foundation establishment cultivation were already too much for him to handle. If there was an even more formidable one, wouldn't it be even more difficult to escape? Xiao Hua looked around. There were already many green pythons in the surroundings. Many of them were still flying back and forth in midair. However, because of the cloud-suppressing seal's might, they didn't dare to advance. Moreover, the sound of suaso and the sound of breaking air became louder. There were even more green pythons rushing over. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly formed seals with his hands and dove into the ground, escaping underground. Just as Xiao Hua's figure disappeared, a small snake that was much smaller than ordinary green pythons flew over from the distance like lightning. This small snake was also green in color. There were some strange runes on its body. Its 8 fleshy wings were separated on both sides of its body. Moreover, on the snake's head, there was a small sarcoma that faintly resembled a crown. That small snake had already appeared. The 3 green pythons immediately very obediently descended from midair. All the other green pythons that were flying in midair also descended and very respectfully prostrated themselves on the ground. Immediately after, from the place where the small snake flew over, more than 10 huge pythons that were several times larger than the previous 3 green pythons flew over and surrounded the small snake. The small snake slightly circled the ground where Xiao Hua had dove into, then raised its head to look in the direction where Xiao Hua had escaped. It hissed twice, then shook its small tail and flapped its 8 fleshy wings. An afterimage streaked across the sky and flew back into the depths of the mountain forest. Soon after, the group of huge pythons also gradually swam back into the thick fog like a tide. Extremely far away, Qian Diheng, who was flying in midair, had a pale face. As if he had seen a ghost, he howled, "Junior brother Xiao, what kind of spirit beast did you provoke? Just its divine sense was able to injure us?" Chapter 1723. Just as Xiao Hua escaped from the ground far away, he did not dare to hesitate and called Sun Shu and the other 2 to flee. However, after a wave of divine sense swept over, the 4 of them simultaneously stopped in midair. Their Naiwen palace felt as if it was pierced by a sharp awl, excruciating pain. Xiao Hua was slightly better. His divine sense was not in his Naiwen palace, but in the Buddha Saraira's Naiwen palace. A burst of golden light flowed from the Buddha Saraira, blocking the pain by quite a bit. However, it still caused Xiao Hua to fall by more than a foot. Qian Diheng and the other 2 were in an even more sorry state. Each of them fell by more than 3 to 4 zhang. Furthermore, the 4 of them were all pale. It was obvious that their divine sense was heavily injured. Qian Diheng naturally could not help but cry out. However, the 4 of them did not dare to stay any longer. Each of them endured the pain of their divine sense and activated their magic power. Only after flying a few hundred li in one breath did Qian Diheng dare to speak. "Big brother, do you think I wanted to?" Xiaohua took a deep breath and tried his best to operate the exquisite leaf scripture, wanting to reduce the pain of his divine sense. He bitterly smiled and said, "Little brother only wanted to attract a few green pythons. Who would have thought that it would actually attract 3 green pythons of Foundation Establishment Cultivation?" Foundation Establishment Cultivation? Sun Shu's face was also pale. However, this paleness had a few traces of redness, adding a few points to her beauty. That's not too possible, right? Green pythons are only first-rank spiritual beasts. What is there to be suspicious about, Senior Sun? Xiaohua said. Little brother's cloud-suppressing seal was almost unable to smash it down. Furthermore, from the green python's bodies, there was an aura similar to that of Foundation Establishment cultivators. The thing that damaged our divine sense shouldn't be these 3 green pythons of Foundation Establishment Cultivation, right? Kun Fian bit his lips and said, "It shouldn't be. However, little brother doesn't know if it's the green pythons." Xiaohua nodded and said, "Little brother even wanted to kill a Foundation Establishment green python. Who would have thought that before I even made a move, this divine sense appeared? Little brother knew that I was not its opponent and hurriedly escaped. Now, I feel that I was really lucky. If not for little brother's alertness, or if the divine sense attack came too late, little brother is afraid that little brother would not be able to escape." Could it be that the green python in the Liqian mountain range has mutated? Qian Diheng asked curiously. Even if it's the green python king, it said that its cultivation base is only at the early stage of Foundation establishment. How could it possibly have the means to attack with divine sense? That must be the case. Little brother only saw a dozen or so green pythons at the early Foundation establishment stage. Could it be that they are all green python kings? Xiaohua said fiercely. "Junior brother Xiao, you've worked hard." Sun Shu looked at Xiaohua with watery eyes. "Our miscalculation put junior martial brother Xiao in a dangerous situation. If it weren't for junior martial brother's incredible speed, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to return to the mountain and answer to martial uncle helplessness." With that, he slapped his hand and took out his bag of holding. "This azure python? I'll give junior brother another 20%. Senior sister Sun said it very well. This brother will also let junior brother Xiao have a few." Qian Diheng grinned and said, "Thup thup thup." Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand. Looking at the 3 people, he felt warm in his heart. Little brother took a lot just now. If I take too much of this thing, it won't be of much use. Little brother is inexperienced. Coming out with you all, I'm happy to be able to help senior brother and senior sister a little. If senior sisters and senior brothers feel that you owe little brother anything, just think of little brother first if there's any good things in the future. All right. Qian Diheng smiled. "We could have returned the favor by taking some stinky snakes, but you suddenly raised it so high. Forget it. Who asked junior martial brother Xiao to be so benevolent? If there's any good things in the future, this brother will think of you first." Many thanks senior brother Qian." Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, "Forget it, we also agree." Sun Shu glanced at Kun Fian and said at the same time, "Right, little brother has a question now." Xiaohua smiled. "This divine sense attack method, does our Imperial Thunder sect have it?" "My Heavenly Thunder Palace has it," Qian Diheng replied. However, it said that it's a technique used by Golden Core Stage seniors. Moreover, only seniors with exceptionally strong divine senses can use it. Yes, my Heavenly Thunder Palace also seems to have it. Kun Fian continued. However, it doesn't seem to be as strong as that divine sense just now. If that divine sense was the Green Python King's, it should be a spiritual beast's innate ability. Naturally, it's stronger than us cultivators who forcibly cultivate it. Sun Shu explained. If junior martial brother Xiao is interested in this, you can look for it in the Dawn Rain continent. This kind of technique is extremely rare. Just relying on the Imperial Thunder sect, I'm afraid it's hard to get it. Isn't that enough? Senior brothers and sisters, if you come across this kind of technique, the first person you think of is little brother? Xiaohua smiled. "AI, you're thinking too much." Qian Diheng said without any trace of politeness. This brother still wants to cultivate it. Can't you just let little brother take a look? Xiao Hua said pitifully. No, of course not. Oh. Qian Diheng laughed loudly. His body suddenly swayed, and he hugged his head with both hands, almost falling from midair again. Sun Shu smiled bitterly. This divine sense isn't easy to recover. Let's hurry ahead and find a secluded place to rest for a few days first. 10 days later, Xiao Hua and the other 3 flew out from the hidden place. They found a new direction and passed through the edge of the Liqian mountain range, rushing to Jianghu city. This time, even the most curious and least afraid Qian Diheng was a lot more well-behaved. He didn't want to stir up trouble and get any benefits. Qian Diheng originally thought that his cultivation was the worst, but after all, he had a magic treasure to protect himself. Moreover, he had a new halberd. Even if he couldn't attack, he could at least protect himself, right? However, the spiritual beast's innate ability was so powerful that it could directly attack divine senses, making it impossible to guard against. If a first-grade spiritual beast was already like this, then what about second- and third-grade spiritual beasts? Keeping one's tail between one's legs and honestly protecting one's life, then looking for an opportunity to build a foundation was the right way. Of course, the Liqian mountain range was definitely not a good place. Although Xiao Hua and the others were more careful, they still bumped into a few second-grade spiritual beasts. For example, the 3-winged frost ladybug, a fist-sized second-grade spiritual beast that looked no different from an ordinary ladybug. Xiao Hua and the others threw out a lot of fireball talismans to escape. Fortunately, there was only one 3-winged frost ladybug. If there was a group of them like the green python, the 4 of them would cry to the heavens and the earth. When the 4 of them flew out of the range of the Liqian mountain range, they were already in a sorry state. When their divine senses swept over and saw that there were already people in front of them, they were greatly relieved. Senior Sister Sun, if I remember correctly, we should be at Mingcue Mountain in 10 days. Jianghu City is about 1,000 miles to the west of Mingcue Mountain. Qian Diheng said with a smile. Sun Shu pursed her lips and smiled. Exactly. There is no teleportation formation from here to Jianghu City. We still have to fly for 10 days. Calculating the time, it should be about time. Let's rest while we fly. That's the way it should be. Kun Fian also said. Along the way, there are signs of human habitation. Other than the people of the secular world, there are also some small cultivation families. It's not worth mentioning. Only Mingcue Mountain's Ling Pei mountain range has some fame. It's a side courtyard of the Lan Li sect. By the time we get there, we'll have already recovered. Mingcue Mountain? Xiao Hua frowned slightly. He seemed to have heard this name from somewhere before, but when he thought about it carefully, he couldn't remember. When Kun Fian mentioned the Lan Li sect, Xiao Hua suddenly realized that this Lan Li sect's name should be something he heard people mention in Jianghu City. It was when he entered Jianghu City that a cultivator directly flew over his head. Some people said that it was the Lan Li sect's 3rd elder, called Reverend Zhuoming, who was said to be a mid-Yuanying stage cultivator. And, since he thought of this, Xiao Hua thought of the origin of Mingcue Mountain. Of course, it was Shi Wuming, who half-gifted and half-sold him the Devil Spear Point. Shi Wuming claimed to be a cultivator from Mingcue Mountain. When he took Xiao Hua's storage pouch, he even said that Xiao Hua could use his name to do something for him. Although it wasn't that long ago, Xiao Hua was now a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, and his cultivation level was comparable to the early stage of the Foundation establishment stage. He had long cast this matter aside. If it weren't for Mingcue Mountain and Jianghu City, Xiao Hua wouldn't have remembered it. Could it be that we'll meet Senior Shi again? Xiao Hua thought of that strange cultivator and felt a trace of gratitude in his heart. That Devil Spear Point had saved Xiao Hua's life many times in the past. It was only after he obtained the Devil Hammer that he stopped using it. Let's go. It's basically safe in front of us. We just need to pay attention to cover our tracks. Qian Diheng began to speak carelessly again. Thus, Xiao Hua and the other 3 put on their camouflage cloaks and flew southwest using their flying technique. They didn't speak a word along the way. On the 9th day, they saw a vast expanse of green in front of them. It was actually a boundless grassland. On the grassland, there were many shepherds, riding horses of various colors, herding flocks of sheep that looked like white clouds. Occasionally, there would be a few columns of smoke rising into the sky. It was quite the scenery outside the Great Wall. Looking into the distance, in the depths of the grassland, there was an extremely tall emerald green mountain, like a piece of jade growing in the water. Needless to say, that should be Mingzue Mountain. After flying into the grassland and seeing Mingzue Mountain, Xiaohua and the others flew slightly to the west. On the evening of the 10th day, in the depths of the grassland, a small town with a radius of dozens of miles appeared. This small town looked somewhat dilapidated. It was surrounded by dilapidated mud walls, as if it was built as a city wall. However, after a long time, it was inevitable that some of it would collapse and some of it would be broken down. The inside and outside of the mud walls were a little spacious. There were some tent-like buildings piled up in the surroundings. These tents were seen many times in the grassland. They should have been built by the residents of the small town. Looking further into the small town, there were some commonly seen buildings, some small courtyards, and some continuous ordinary houses. Moreover, the styles of these buildings were clearly different. It seemed that people from all over the place had gathered here. "We'll go down." Sun Shu's divine sense swept over and waved his hand. The four of them landed not far from Jiangqing town. Chapter 1724. Junior brothers, please wait a moment. Xiao Hua and the others landed on the ground. Kun Fian smiled and clapped his hands, taking out a sound transmission talisman and said, "It's close to the appointed time, that fellow must have arrived. Wait for I to call him out." But where Kun Fian's spiritual power was activated, that yellow talisman turned into a red light and flew into the air. It only circled in the air for a moment, then fell back down. Seeing that the sound transmission talisman didn't fly out, Kun Fian's face changed slightly, and said curiously, "Could it be that fellow hasn't arrived yet?" Then, Kun Fian kept the sound transmission talisman, and took out a thunder sound transmission talisman. He muttered something, and then activated his spiritual power. That thunder sound transmission talisman flew into the air, and let out a faint thunder roar. That's right. This thunder sound transmission talisman was the same as the sound transmission talisman, spinning in the air and falling down, turning into a yellow talisman and floating in front of Kun Fian's eyes. Strange. Sun Shu also said curiously, "Could it be that this fellow didn't come at all?" Xiao Hua knew that this thunder sound transmission talisman was more powerful than the usual 1,000-mile sound transmission talisman. Any cultivator within 2,000 to 3,000 miles could receive it with the secret technique of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Since Kun Fian's thunder sound transmission talisman couldn't be sent out, that meant that the cultivator who sent the message to Kun Fian wasn't nearby at all. Yes, could it be that there's a cat in this world that doesn't eat fish? Qian Diheng smacked his lips, looking at the distant Jiangcheng town and said curiously. Xiao Hua's heart moved and he said warily, "Senior Kun, could it be that there's a trap here?" Kun Fian thought for a moment and shook his head slightly. "We're just cultivators of the qi refining stage, and we don't have any treasures on us. Moreover, we're just here to travel. What other people can do to us? Moreover, we're disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect. It's not like that fellow doesn't know. He wouldn't dare to have any evil intentions towards us." Seeing that Kun Fian had such a good feeling, Xiao Hua didn't say anything. He had been a loose cultivator before. Although he wasn't as vicious and merciless as other loose cultivators, but if there was really something at stake, he definitely wouldn't put the name of the Imperial Thunder Sect or Shanghua Sect in his eyes. Of course, Xiao Hua didn't feel any fear in his heart when he arrived here. He knew that there wouldn't be any danger, so he didn't say anything else. Perhaps this fellow Taoist has encountered something and is unable to come? Sun Shu smiled and said, "This condensed knowledge treasure is so precious. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If there's nothing big, I'll definitely come." "Do you still need to say it? He must have died." Qian Diheng said while blinking his eyes. Junior brothers, please wait for a moment. I will go with junior sister Sun to take a look. Kun Fian pulled on Sun Shu's sleeve and said to Xiao Hua and Qian Diheng, senior sisters, please be careful. Xiao Hua nodded. When Kun Fian and Sun Shu's figures disappeared, Qian Diheng said in a low voice, Junior brother Xiao, I thought you brought the cloud-suppressing seal to the workshop to refine it again. I didn't expect that it wasn't the case. That, the thing you sent to the workshop, is it also a magic treasure? From the time they met the green python to Jianghu City, along the way, Xiao Hua saw Qian Diheng several times and wanted to ask him. But every time he wanted to say something but stopped. He didn't know what he wanted to say. Now that he heard it, he smiled bitterly in his heart and asked, Senior brother Qian, what's the difference if it's a magic treasure or not? About a year later, I'll return the crafting workshop's token to you. Qian Diheng smiled and said, Actually, I don't want to know anything about you. It's just that, you see, I only have one halberd that I can take out. It really doesn't match the magic treasure on me. If junior brother has any extra magic treasure, do you think you can let me take advantage of it first? Oh, junior brother, don't worry. I won't shortchange you of spirit stones. Even if it's some cultivation method, only I can find it, I'll definitely give it to you. So it's like that? Xiao Hua smiled and said, Senior brother Qian, you're lacking. How rare are magic treasures? It's already a great fortune for me to get one magic treasure. How can I have more? Junior brother, I know you used to be a loose cultivator, you must have some connections. If you have any good things in the future, don't forget me. Qian Diheng was a little disappointed, but still said in a low voice. Looking at Qian Diheng's I know expression, Xiao Hua could only rub his nose and smile apologetically. Senior brother Qian should also know how this little brother's cloud-suppressing seal came about. Forget it, there's no need to say more. If I have any good things in the future, I'll think of you first. Good junior brother. Qian Diheng patted Xiao Hua's shoulder and laughed happily. This cultivation sect's disciples' communication method is really extraordinary. Xiao Hua sighed secretly, but he also laughed secretly. If he had a good magic treasure, the first one he would think of would be Qian Diheng, but the first one he would give would be his senior brother Xiangyang. After that, Qian Diheng didn't say anything more. The two of them sat cross-legged on a hill in the grassland and adjusted their breathing. Unexpectedly, they waited for more than 2 hours. When the sun above the grassland was in the west and a cold wind blew, Kun Fian and Sun Shu returned. Seeing their different expressions, Xiao Hua felt strange. Qian Diheng asked, What's wrong? Is there any news? Kun Fian's face was full of indifference. He raised his head and said, There's good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first? Naturally the good news? Qian Diheng laughed. The good news is that the small trade gathering will be held in 3 days. We've come just in time. Then what's the bad news? Xiao Hua asked curiously, Could it be that they want some token? Junior brother Xiao is really experienced and knowledgeable. That's exactly it. Sun Shu frowned and said, It's the same as what senior sister Kun got. There's a Lingpei mountain villa in Jianghu City. If you don't have a token from the villa, you can't enter the trade gathering. Isn't that simple? Qian Diheng laughed and said, We just need to see who's participating in the trade gathering. Then we can ask nicely. If not, that token has a mark. It belongs to whoever it's given to. Others can't replace it. Sun Shu said angrily. So cautious? Qian Diheng was speechless. There's a treasure inside. Sun Shu smiled bitterly. If we're not cautious, can we succeed? Just the 3 words treasure is enough to attract all the cultivators below the gold core stage in the auction in Chiyu City. Just Lingpei Mountain Villa? Can it bear it? Kun Fian laughed coldly. It doesn't matter if you don't have a token. When I get there, I'll directly take out the name of the Imperial Thunder Sect. I don't believe that a small Lingpei Mountain Villa won't give my Imperial Thunder Sect face. Chapter 1725. 3 days later, a bright moon hung in the night sky. The grassland's night sky was unusually clear, and the stars scattered around the moon. "It's time, let's go." Kun Fian floated up from the ground, his face expressionless. Waiting for Sun Shu and the others to get up, Xiaohua waved his hand and dozens of shiny talismans flew from the ground. It was the array that Xiaohua had set up. During this period of time, although Xiaohua didn't stop studying the rabbit talisman, he also had some gains. But because Sun Shu and the others were by his side, he didn't make any new talismans, so the array was still the original array. But Xiaohua's method of setting up the array was getting more and more skillful, and he even faintly felt that there were other arrays in his memory that were about to be recovered. Xiaohua kept the talismans and put on the camouflage, and followed the three of them to fly towards Jianghu City. Although Jianghu City was on the grassland, because the buildings were relatively simple, the area was huge, and it was actually half the size of Weeping Moon City. In the northeast of Jianghu City, there was a place with bright lights. It was a manor that occupied a large area. Under the night sky, under the moonlight, there was an archway with the words Ling Pei Mountain Villa written on it. Under the archway, there were dozens of boys in Taoist robes. They were all about the 4th or 5th level of qi refining. All of them had bright eyes and stood with their hands behind their backs. Xiaohua and the others landed on the ground. Looking at the deserted, decorated archway, they walked over. When the servants saw the cultivators coming, 2 of them hurriedly came forward to greet them. They bowed and said, "Greetings to the 4 seniors. May I know why the 4 seniors have come to my Ling Pei Mountain Villa?" "We are here to participate in the spirit gathering. Please lead us." Kun Fian walked in front and said in a deep voice, "We welcome the 4 seniors to participate in the spirit gathering. Please show us your tokens." The slightly taller boy said respectfully, "We are the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect. We came in a hurry and didn't have any tokens." Kun Fian clapped his hands and took out the token of the Imperial Thunder Sect and handed it over. "This is the token of the Imperial Thunder Sect disciples. Show it to your master." The Imperial Thunder Sect? The boy was obviously surprised. He looked at the other boy and was at a loss. Although the other boy was short, he had an extraordinary bearing. After being stunned for a moment, he immediately bowed and said, "So it's a senior from the Imperial Thunder Sect. This junior really admires the reputation of your sect. To be able to meet a senior from the Imperial Thunder Sect is truly a blessing for this junior." He, Kun Fei Yen smiled. However, the boy immediately changed the topic and said, "However, the order I received was to check the tokens of the Lingji gathering. The 4 of you don't have the tokens of my Lingpei Mountain Manor, so I don't dare to let you in. Seniors, please wait here for a moment. Junior will take senior's token and go in. Let's see what the Manor Lord decides. Go. Kun Fian's face was a little unhappy as he threw his command medallion to the boy and said impatiently, "Senior, please wait a moment." The boy took the command medallion, turned around, and left quickly. Not long after, a cultivator around 40 years old hurried over. The messenger boy wasn't behind him, and this cultivator's expression was very busy. It was obvious that he left the boy behind and rushed over himself. Seeing the expression of this cultivator who was also at the 12th level of qi refining, Kun Fian was secretly pleased. That cultivator went forward and handed over Kun Fian's command medallion. He said respectfully, "I am Ming Chui Mountain Manor's disciple, Chu Ming. Seniors from the Imperial Thunder Sect are here, so this junior didn't welcome you from afar. Sorry for making senior laugh." Although Kun Fian was arrogant, but seeing that he was also a cultivator of the same level, he quickly took his command medallion and bowed as well. "Fellow Chu is too polite. I am also at the 12th level of qi refining. I don't deserve to be called senior. It's better to call me fellow." Hearing that, Chu Ming's heart relaxed, but he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he said respectfully, "No matter what, since you are from the Imperial Thunder Sect, you are giving face to my Ling Pei Mountain Manor. I will welcome you." However, without waiting for Kun Fian to speak again, Chu Ming changed the topic like the boy earlier. "It's just that, The Lingpei Mountain Manor's Lingji meeting this time is a private meeting between the disciples of my Mingchui Mountain Manor and the Lanli sect. There are some secrets in this, so only those who have the token can enter. Since you don't have the token. Chu Ming didn't finish his words, but his meaning was very obvious. He was waiting for Kun Fian to leave by himself. Lanli sect? Kun Fian said softly, Lanli sect and my Imperial Thunder sect are on good terms. Usually, if there are any matters between the two sects, we will also communicate with the Lanli sect fellow. Fellow Taoist, I'm very sorry, there is indeed a secret to this Lingji gathering. Otherwise, my Lingpei Mountain Villa would definitely open its doors and invite the four of you in. No matter what Kun Fian said, Chu Ming replied apologetically. Fellow, are you not giving face to my Imperial Thunder sect? Kun Fian said with a cold smile, isn't it just a condensed knowledge treasure? It's not like my Imperial Thunder sect hasn't seen it before. Chu Ming's eyes narrowed. Although he didn't say anything cold, his tone had already changed. Since you know that there is a condensed knowledge treasure, you naturally know the stakes. My Lanli sect didn't invite many of our own disciples. How can outer sect disciples casually enter? It's just a small Lingpei Mountain Manor. Qian Diheng at the side was also a little angry. Could it be that it's even harder to enter than Lanli sect's Limo Ridge? I don't know if it's hard or not. I have always walked through the door. Chu Ming also sneered. If you want to know, you can try to enter. However, if there are any mishaps, don't blame I for not warning you first. Seeing that things had turned bad and seeing Chu Ming's fearless look, Kun Fian was a little dumbfounded. Although they didn't take off the fog, but not only did the Imperial Thunder sect lose face, even her own heart was extremely tangled. Just as both sides were in a deadlock and Kun Fian was riding a tiger and couldn't get off, Xiaohua, who was standing at the back, walked up and cupped his hands. Fellow Chu, how should I address Mingchui Mountain's Senior Shi Wuming? Senior Shi is I's martial uncle. Chu Ming's face softened and nodded. However, even if you are acquainted with martial uncle Shi, I'm afraid that today's matter won't work. It's like this. Xiaohua smiled and said, Senior Shi once owed Junior a favor. That day, he once said that this poor Taoist can use his name to do something. Of course, this matter cannot be against reason and nature. This poor Taoist feels that this is the right time, right? Chu Ming thought for a moment and nodded slightly. Martial Uncle Shi's disciple. I have also given him a token. If what you say is true, I can help Martial Uncle Shi return the favor. However, where is Martial Uncle Shi's token? Fellow can use Martial Uncle Shi's token as a token for this matter. I can also use Martial Uncle Shi's token to report back. Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said without hesitation, Senior Shi only said one sentence, he didn't give I a token. Fellow says it so easily. Since you don't have a token, then aren't you just saying it for nothing? I's martial uncle Shi is also not in Lingpei Mountain Villa. There's no proof. Chu Ming laughed. There's no other way. Xiaohua sighed. That day, Senior Shi said so. If Mingchui Mountain doesn't care about I, there's nothing I can do. Then, Xiaohua turned to Chu Ming and was about to speak when Chu Ming's smile deepened. Fellow, just now I was just testing. Martial Uncle Shi, cough cough, often like this. May I know where you saw Martial Uncle Shi? What was his appearance like? This time, Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought that Shi Wuming was just talking nonsense. Now it seems that Senior Shi really has this habit. Xiaohua took a step forward and described Shi Wuming's appearance to Chu Ming. He then transmitted a message to Chu Ming about what happened that day. Naturally, Chu Ming wanted to examine the demonic spear tip. Xiaohua took it out from his space and handed it over. No need. Chu Ming saw that the magic spear tip didn't even take it. He waved his hand and said, I have seen this thing before. And this matter, I also know about it. So it was the fellow from the Imperial Thunder sect who bought this thing. Chu Ming looked at the magic spear tip with a strange expression. Even his words were strange. Since it was you who took this thing, Martial Uncle Shi's favor is understandable. Fellow Taoist, please keep it well. Xiaohua was confused. However, since Chu Ming admitted it, his goal was achieved. Sure enough, after Xiaohua kept the magic spear tip, Chu Ming clapped his hands and smiled. Since Martial Uncle Shi has done us a favor, the 4 of you can participate in the Spirit Ji gathering. However, I would like to ask the 4 of you to take down the mystic insect. Xiaohua and the others kept the mystic insect and greeted Chu Ming again. Chu Ming saw that the 4 of them were at Qi refining stage level 12 and knew that they were here for the foundation establishment stage. He didn't ask any more questions and personally led the 4 of them into Ling Pei Mountain Villa. For fellow cultivators, please. Chu Ming led the 4 of them into a hall. Inside the hall, there was already a good number of cultivators. Without exception, all of them were energy refining stage cultivators. Additionally, it was clear that many of them were familiar with each other. Whispers could be heard within the hall as many of them were discussing something. When these cultivators saw Chu Ming leading the 4 Qi refining stage cultivators in, they stopped and looked at the 4 of them in surprise. Chu Ming didn't explain and led Xiaohua and the others to a table near the center. He raised his hand and said, "For fellow cultivators, please sit. The Spirit Ji gathering will begin in half an hour. I hope the 4 of you are fated to be here." "Thank you, fellow cultivator Chu." Xiaohua smiled and cupped his hands. No need to thank me. If you want to calculate, I have taken advantage of you." Chu Ming cupped his hands and quickly left. After Chu Ming left, the hall was silent for a moment. Then, it gradually became louder. A cultivator not far from Xiaohua looked at the 4 of them and walked forward. He cupped his hands and said, "I am Meng Yang. Which branch of my Lan Li sect are you from? Forgive me for my poor eyesight, but I have never seen it before." Chapter 1726. Seeing that Meng Yang was also at Qi refining stage 12, Xiaohua smiled and said, "I and the other 3 are disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect and were just passing by Jianghu City. Since Ling Pei Mountain Villa has such a grand event, I also came to try my luck." When Meng Yang heard Xiaohua's words of trying his luck, his expression changed and he said in shock, "How is this possible? The Spirit Ji meeting is a strictly guarded secret of the Blue Li sect. How did you Imperial Thunder sect disciples know about it?" Meng Yang's voice was quite loud and the people around heard it too. They immediately stopped talking. Many people in the hall were already paying attention. Now that they saw the commotion, they became silent again. "How did the 4 of you get the news?" Meng Yang's eyes narrowed as he looked around and said, "We haven't found the opportunity for the Blue Li sect disciples, so we didn't ask the outer sect disciples to come and find it." "That's right." The disciples of the various branches of the Blue Li sect all shouted. How could Kun Fian explain this to them? His eyes were full of disdain and he didn't say a word. The arrogance of the Imperial Thunder sect disciples was obvious. "Fellow cultivator, there are some things that I still have to say. Otherwise, it will be very disadvantageous for you." Meng Yang seemed to have some grudges with the Imperial Thunder sect. Seeing that no one spoke, he sneered. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and smiled. "We are here to participate in the Spirit Ji meeting. We don't have any intention of snatching the opportunity from your sect's disciples. And this opportunity to condense the treasure can only be unique. If it is your sect's disciple's opportunity, we can only clap and congratulate him. Do you think we will snatch it? You actually know about the treasure?" Another disciple was even more shocked. "Not only that, I came with the permission of Senior Shi Wuming to participate," Xiaohua said coldly. Hearing that Xiaohua was Shi Wuming in advance, everyone shrunk their necks and looked at each other. Meng Yang was also quite embarrassed and forced a smile. "Since you are Martial Uncle Shi's guest, just say it directly. Why hide it?" Xiaohua glanced at him and closed his eyes to rest. The Blue Li sect disciples around them started to whisper again. After a while, a few more disciples gradually entered the hall. They were all around the 11th layer of Qi condensation. At the head of the hall, there was a table that had been empty all this time. No cultivators sat there. Almost an hour later, they heard the sound of footsteps followed by the sound of rustling clothes. Xiao Hua and the others looked up and saw an early-stage foundation-building cultivator leading several disciples around the 11th layer of the aura-refining realm into the hall. "Greetings, Senior Hu." "Greetings, Manor Lord Hu." The group of cultivators stood up. Xiao Hua and the others looked at each other and also stood up. "Disciples, please have a seat." Manor Master Hu walked to the table at the head of the table. His gaze turned and paused on Xiao Hua and the others. Then he said, "This humble manor is fortunate enough to hold this gathering for the future of my Lan Li sect. Perhaps some disciple will have this opportunity. If this disciple can come out of my Ling Pei Mountain Villa, I hope that you will take care of my Ling Pei Mountain Villa in the future." Of course, the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples are lucky enough to have this opportunity. I welcome the arrival of the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. "Thank you, Manor Lord Hu." Xiao Hua and the others didn't dare to neglect and said in unison. "Alright, I won't say any more. This condensed treasure has already been tried. I have no fate with it. I's disciples haven't tried it yet. They will try it with everyone." Hearing that the Ling Pei Mountain Villa's disciples haven't tried it, the group of disciples showed respect on their faces. They smiled and said, "Manor Lord Hu is truly righteous. You are a capable disciple of my Lan Li sect. Junior and the others admire you." "Ha, disciples think too highly of I." Manor Master Hu laughed and waved his hand. The disciples behind him all sat at the head table. He then said, "I'll invite fellow Taoist fan over. Let's see who among the disciples here has the opportunity." "Thank you, Manor Lord Hu." Everyone bowed again. Manor Head Hu had only been gone for half the time it took to brew a cup of tea when he returned with a cultivator who was also in the early stage of foundation establishment. The cultivator was not tall and looked very simple and honest. He had thick eyebrows and a dark face. He looked just like a farmer. Manor Lord Hu led Fan Qingmu to the main hall and said with a smile, "Disciples, this is Senior Fan Qingmu. He is a good friend of I. This time, he came to my Ling Pei Mountain Villa because of I, Junior's greet Senior Fan." The disciples naturally respectfully saluted. Fan Qingmu's tone was very cold. He waved his hand and said, "Since you are all Manor Lord Hu's juniors and Manor Lord Hu has gathered all of you here, then Manor Lord Hu has already considered you all as his own nephews. Since we have such a relationship, I won't be polite. There's no need for any of the so-called etiquette. Today's matter was facilitated by Manor Lord Hu and gave all of you this opportunity. In I's opinion, no matter who has the opportunity or not, they must remember Manor Lord Hu's intentions and remember them in their hearts. We understand. It is because of Manor Lord Hu's righteousness that we have this opportunity." The disciples all said in unison. Xiao Hua slightly frowned and glanced at Sun Shu and the others. Sure enough, the three of them had a strange expression. Of course, from the current situation, this wasn't a spirit gathering, it was more like a loyalty gathering. "Haha, I's intention was to give all of you a chance, I didn't think too much about it." Manor Lord Hu said with a red face. At this moment, a red light flew over. It was a voice transmission talisman. When Manor Lord Hu's divine sense swept over it, his heart thumped. He thought to himself, "This guy. Why did he rush over at this time?" However, Manor Lord Hu's expression didn't change. He said, "Alright, I won't say any more. I'm sure all of you are already anxious, right?" As he said that, he patted his hand and took out a disc array from his storage bag. "I will open the seal in the hall. For such an important matter, it's better to keep it a secret." Manor Master Hu tapped the disc array with his hand and several orange-red threads of light flew out from the disc array. The threads of light drew an arc in the air and landed at the four corners of the hall. The moment the threads of light landed, it was as though something had been ignited. Surging flames roared and engulfed the entire hall. "Io!" Xiao Hua was slightly shocked. However, when he looked at the calm Lan Li sect disciples around him, he narrowed his eyes and released his divine sense. The surging flames quickly covered the entire hall. Just as the flames were about to close, a soft chi sound rang out and the flames in the hall disappeared without a trace. At this moment, Xiaohua's divine sense was immediately repelled by the restrictions on the four walls of the hall and could no longer penetrate through. Chapter 1727. Alright, I'll leave for a moment. Mannerhead who scanned the area with his divine sense in satisfaction. As he spoke, he pointed at the disc array and a similar thread of light shot out. Mannerhead who followed the thread of light out of the hall. Xiaohua looked at Mannerhead who's back thoughtfully. But all the other disciples, including Kuan-Fian and the other two, had their eyes focused on Fan Qingmu. Disciples? Fan Qingmu naturally understood what everyone was thinking. He clapped his hands and a strange-looking magic tool appeared in his hands. That magic tool was like a turtle shell. Except for an opening in one place, everything else was tightly sealed. There was nothing special about it. Everyone scanned it with their divine sense but couldn't penetrate it. I know what everyone is thinking. I will get straight to the point. The condensed knowledge treasure is in this Jianghu. Which disciple has the opportunity to become the owner of the condensed knowledge treasure? You only need to reach your hand in and you will know. Fan Qingmu's voice sounded in the hall. However, before everyone tries, I have two requests. Xiaohua retracted his gaze from where Mannerhead who disappeared. Looking at the eagerness in Sun Shu's eyes, he transmitted his voice. Senior Sun, is what Senior Fan said correct? Just reach out and touch it, can you be sure? Sun Shu's eyes flashed with excitement. She transmitted her voice with a smile. Exactly. That year, that senior from the Imperial Thunder sect also coincidentally came to the Sun Thunder Palace for business and accidentally damaged the magic tool that contained the condensed knowledge treasure. When he touched the condensed knowledge treasure with his hand, the condensed knowledge treasure immediately seeped into his skin and all the realms were absorbed by him. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Senior Sun, are you sure you're not telling a story? How can the condensed knowledge treasure be placed in a magic tool? Don't you know how to use a magic tool to protect it? Junior Xiao is different. The condensed knowledge treasure is important, but the problem is that the reincarnated disciple's cultivation is so high. If we use a magic tool to protect it, Golden Dan cultivators can't touch it. What's the use of the condensed knowledge treasure? Sun Shu smiled. As for all these coincidences, maybe it's heaven's will. Heaven's will? Xiaohua shook his head. If the heavens have feelings, the heavens will grow old. If the earth has no hatred, the earth will be peaceful. Illusory, Xiaohua said casually, but as soon as his words reached Sun Shu, Xiaohua's heart trembled. The karma hand in the air flickered slightly. Karma. 2 of the 3,000 great Daos. Perhaps karma doesn't just apply to one life. Even if it's 3 lives, the karma heavenly Tao will still work. After Xiaohua comprehended this point, the hand of karma became a little clearer. On the other hand, Sun Shu's eyes flashed with a trace of confusion and a trace of tenderness. He looked at Xiaohua and unconsciously muttered in his heart, that's right, if the heavens have feelings, the heavens will also grow old. Why is there so much love in this world? In the hall, Fan Qingmu's voice sounded, my first condition is that every disciple must pay I a piece of top-level spiritual stone before they try. This. Xiaohua was stunned, then the corners of his mouth curled up as he thought to himself, this senior is really good at making money. But thinking about it, that was indeed the case. She had no reason to let him try anything. How could there be no benefit? This piece of top-grade spirit stone was probably because it was in Ling Pei Mountain Villa. If it was somewhere else, it would be even more. Senior Fan has worked so hard, we should be filial to you. At the head table, a disciple of Manor Master who stood up and said, this junior is not talented, but I will help senior collect these spirit stones. Hee, thank you for your trouble. Fan Qingmu squeezed out a smile from his face. Obviously, he knew this disciple, and the other disciples also knew him. Someone even handed over the spirit stones to him and said with a smile, thank you, Senior Brother Ling. Xiao Hua and the others didn't say anything. When senior brother Ling came over, they all handed over the spirit stones to him. After senior brother Ling collected the spirit stones from everyone in the hall and handed them to Fan Qingmu accepted them without even looking and said, "My second condition is also very simple. Before you put your hand into the Qingwu, you must make a blood oath that if any disciple is the owner of this treasure, you must do your best to help I step into the gold core stage." What? The Lan Li sect disciples didn't know what they were thinking, but Xiao Hua and the others couldn't help but frown. Do your best to help him step into the gold core stage? Brothers and sisters. Senior brother Ling, who just received the spirit stones, stood up and said, "Senior brother Fan was lucky to be able to obtain this treasure. Naturally, he has some luck with the owner of this treasure. For him to take out the treasure for us to try is in itself a very righteous thing to do. Think about it, if one of your fellow disciples is the owner of this treasure, and senior brother Fan doesn't come at all, will this fellow disciple have the luck to reach the realm of his previous life? If this fellow disciple doesn't return senior brother Fan's favor, will he be able to break through the realm of his previous life and go further? Senior brother Fan's condition is also to help this fellow disciple. Moreover, senior brother Fan also said that he will do his best. If this fellow disciple doesn't have the ability, then senior brother Fan's words are in vain. Senior brother Fan is also leaving a lot of leeway for everyone." Xiao Hua and the others looked at each other, and there seemed to be some realization in each other's eyes. The matter of a meat pie falling from the sky has never happened before. If you want to get something, you must give something. Fan Qingmu's condition was inevitable. The Blue Li sect disciples in the hall pondered for a moment, and then someone shouted, "Senior brother Fan is right. We only need to pay the price of one spirit stone to obtain the treasure. It is really easy. To help senior brother Fan step into the gold core stage is the obligation and price of the treasure's owner. I agree to make a blood oath." "Good, this fellow disciple. Come over and try first." Fan Qingmu was overjoyed and pointed with a smile. "Yes, thank you senior brother Fan." The disciple stepped forward and bowed. "Fellow disciple doesn't need to be like this. If you are the owner of the treasure, I will have to call you senior brother." Fan Qingmu patted the disciple's shoulder and forced a smile on his face. "I don't dare. If this disciple is fated, I will never forget senior's grace." That disciple was very flattered, and hurriedly discovered the blood oath. Then, with a trembling arm, he slowly extended a hand into the Qingwu. Evidently, Fan Qingmu was also extremely concerned, his eyes fixed on that disciple's reaction. Unfortunately, after the disciple reached his hand in, he was first stunned, then at a loss. The previous anxiety had long disappeared. "Forget it. Fellow disciple, please take out your hand." Fan Qingmu was not surprised. He smiled naturally and said, "It seems that you are not the owner of the treasure." "But..." The disciple helplessly took out his hand. 3 of his fingers seemed to be still moving, as if he wanted to continue. The disciple also had something to say and wanted to argue. However, he looked at Fan Qingmu's appearance and then looked at the other disciples who had already walked behind him. He did not say the rest of his words. He turned around and walked back to his seat, sitting there in a daze. The disciple next to him naturally wanted to ask, but looking at the disciple's appearance and thinking that he would be able to touch the treasure soon, he did not ask any more. Although there were many disciples in the hall, it was easy to reach into the treasure. In just half an hour, except for Xiao Hua and the other 3, all the disciples in the hall had tried. The entire hall was silent. No one spoke. If a needle fell to the ground, one could probably hear the sound. It was as if the air in the entire hall had condensed. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Xiao Hua sighed. He stood up and walked in front of Fan Qingmu. He cupped his hands and said, "Junior Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder Sect greets Senior Fan. Manor Master who just told I that the 4 of you are Senior Chu's favor. Senior Chu also has a favor for I, so I cannot refuse." Please. Fan Qingmu nodded slightly and said. Xiao Hua casually swore a blood oath, extending his hand into Qingwu. "Why is it so soft?" Xiaohua only felt that there was something slippery and soft at the place where his fingers touched. Very naturally, two of his fingers slightly pinched. And at the place where he pinched, that slippery thing was like liquid, sliding out from his fingers. The kind of coolness was produced. It seems that there is no reaction? Xiaohua's eyes turned and thought very strangely. Hee, little friend Xiao, you don't seem to be the owner of this treasure. Fan Qingmu smiled and said, please take out your finger. Yes, Junior understands. Xiaohua did not have much hope. Hearing Fan Qingmu's reminder, he took out his hand and looked between his fingers. There was no wet place. Immediately after, Kun Fian, Qian Diheng, and Sun Shu each went forward to try. Without exception, there was no change. The disappointment on the faces of the three was needless to say. The faces of the Lan Li sect disciples were also filled with joy. Forget it, Fan Qingmu clapped his hand and the treasure flew into the air. As he kept it in his storage bag, he raised his head and shouted, Manor Master Hu, please open the enchantment. Among the disciples of Ling Pei Mountain Villa, except for a disciple at the 12th level of Qi refining who did not move, the others also stood up and walked towards the entrance of the hall. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. At the entrance, a ball of orange flame was produced. The flame condensed into the shape of a rocket. With a whoosh, it shot towards Fan Qingmu. Fan Qingmu was in the middle of putting away his storage bag, so he wasn't on guard at all. It was only when the fire arrow was about a foot in front of him that he realized it was coming. Fan Qingmu didn't have time to say anything. He formed a seal with his hand and waved it forward. A thunder palm appeared from his palm and struck the fire arrow. With a light kacha sound, the half-foot-long thunder palm hit the rocket. The orange flame was completely shattered and fell to the ground. Manor Lord Hu, what do you mean by this? Fan Qingmu's expression changed as he said coldly, do you want to leave this Ningji treasure behind? Chapter 1728. Manor Master Hu, don't you want the lives of your Lan Li sect disciples? Fan Qingmu clapped his hand and a magic weapon that looked like a crutch appeared in his hand. He sneered, moreover, I have made it clear that if you don't have eyes spell, no one can open this Jianghu. The condensed knowledge treasure inside. You can't get it. Who knew that it would have been better if Fan Qingmu didn't say that? As soon as his voice fell, more than a dozen orange-red brilliants flashed from around him. Each brilliance formed a fire arrow and shot towards Fan Qingmu's body at the same time. Go! Fan Qingmu's eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness. He released his pressure and filled the entire hall. Then he waved his magic weapon again and several rotating brilliances came out from the crutch. They shot in different trajectories towards the Ling Pei Mountain Villa disciples who had walked to the entrance of the hall and were already alert. They took out their yellow talismans and prepared to defend themselves. Puff, puff, puff. There were a series of muffled sounds. How could the Ling Pei Mountain Villa disciples' yellow talismans be a match for Fan Qingmu's magic weapon? They were easily broken by the brilliance. Moreover, the brilliance that pierced through the yellow talismans was like a sharp sword. It didn't lose its momentum and pierced towards every disciple's body. Kacha kacha, just as the brilliance pierced the disciples' bodies, the brilliance on their bodies flickered and disappeared. Then, there was the sound of the brilliance shattering. The yellow talismans on their bodies couldn't withstand a single blow and were all pierced by the brilliance. The disciples without the yellow talismans were like chickens waiting to be slaughtered under the pressure of a foundation establishment cultivator. Their bodies were easily pierced by the brilliance and they didn't have any power to fight back. They all fell into a pool of blood. The disciple who was at the peak of the 12th level of Qi refining realm who was sitting at the head table just now didn't get up. Although there was some panic on his face, he wasn't as frightened as the surrounding disciples. When he collapsed to the ground, he clapped his hands and a small triangular flag was pinched in his hand. Fan Qingmu killed several disciples of Ling Pei Mountain Villa. He glanced around and saw the situation in the hall clearly. However, the dozens of fire arrows that were shot out from the array in the hall had already flown in front of him. He didn't have time to chase after the other Lan Li sect disciples. Fan Qingmu sneered. He really didn't understand what manner head who meant. However, since he dared to come to Ling Pei Mountain Villa, he naturally had a plan to deal with it. He clapped his hand again, and a ruler-like celestial artifact appeared from his storage bag. As he activated his spiritual power, it quickly flew above his head. Immediately, a yellow brilliance emitted from the ruler. In the blink of an eye, it protected Fan Qingmu's body. At this moment, the fire arrow that was flying towards him had only flown half a foot forward. Fan Qingmu's eyes narrowed as he saw his magic item protecting him. He waved the magic item in his hand once more, and several dozen rays of light spun out to meet the fire arrows. Pa 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 pa. A series of crisp sounds could be heard. Flames flashed around Fan Qingmu like fireworks, but they were also annihilated. Mannerhead who, if you don't show up, how can you be Ai's opponent with just the array in this hall? Fan Qingmu laughed heartily. He cast his gaze towards the many disciples in the hall. Under his pressure, everyone, including the 4 disciples from the Imperial Lightning Sect, had collapsed to the ground. They looked at him with pale faces, their eyes filled with horror and fear. Although Fan Qingmu's magic item produced a lot of brilliance, it was only an attack after all. In addition to 70% of the fire arrows being destroyed, 30% of the fire arrows leaped out from the gaps in the brilliance and shot straight at his protective light curtain. Pa pa pa. Just as Fan Qingmu's gaze was wandering, several fire arrows shot at the light curtain. Without exception, they couldn't break through the protection of the light curtain and turned into fireworks that fell to the ground. Therefore, Fan Qingmu threw away his last bit of vigilance and sneered, "Since Mannerhead who is so heartless, don't blame I for being unrighteous. I will kill all of your descendants in Ling Pei Mountain Villa." As he spoke, he waved the magic item in his hand again and again. Many rays of brilliance flashed like sharp swords and shot at the many disciples who collapsed in the hall. Suddenly, screams sounded in the hall. One by one, the lives of the Lan Li sect disciples were easily taken by Fan Qingmu. The 4 disciples of Imperial Thunder sect naturally collapsed to the ground and couldn't move. Xiao Huan narrowed his eyes and calmly observed. Not only was the cloud-suppressing seal eager to try, but the mighty Vajra celestial body hidden in his body could come out at any time to resist Fan Qingmu's pressure. Fortunately, Fan Qingmu knew the origin of Xiao Hua and the others. He seemed to have a lingering fear, or perhaps he had other plans. When he waved his magic item, he missed the 4 of them. Since that was the case, Xiao Hua didn't want to create more trouble and didn't want to get involved in the grudge between the Lan Li sect and Fan Qingmu. He only allowed Fan Qingmu to kill the disciples of the Lan Li sect while he carefully took precautions. However, just when Fan Qingmu took control of the entire hall, another change suddenly occurred. Most of the fire arrows that were shot at Fan Qingmu's protective light curtain fell to the ground. It was obvious that their power was not enough to break through the defense of the light curtain. However, just when Fan Qingmu shifted his attention away and focused on killing the disciples of the Lan Li sect, the moment one of the fire arrows touched the light curtain, the flame on the fire arrow disappeared and revealed its original form. It was actually a slender magic item in the shape of a rhombus. The sharp tip of the rhombus magic item had a faint blue light flickering. Moreover, there were also faint runes flowing around the magic item. Puff! The moment the flames disappeared, the rhombus-shaped celestial artifact suddenly raised its head like an awakened green python and rushed towards the light screen. The light screen that had blocked the numerous fire arrows only lasted for a moment before the rhombus-shaped celestial artifact's blue tip corroded a hole in it. The rhombus-shaped celestial artifact easily flew through the hole and pierced straight towards Fan Qingmu's heart. Ah? Fan Qingmu was alarmed when he sensed that the light screen of his Dharma artifact had been broken. He quickly formed a seal with his free hand and sent a thunder palm toward the rhombus-shaped Dharma artifact. The thunder palm struck, but the rhombus-shaped Dharma artifact seemed to have a mind of its own. With a slight twist, it bypassed the thunder palm. This is bad. Only then did Fan Qingmu realize that something was wrong. He hurriedly slapped his shoulder, and a light green brilliance rapidly spread from his shoulder to his entire body. Unfortunately, although the brilliance was fast, it was not as fast as the rhombus-shaped artifact. As soon as the light green brilliance reached Fan Qingmu's shoulder, the artifact's sharp point pierced his heart. In an instant, the brilliance from his heart shone brightly. It seemed to be Fan Qingmu's protective defense. Unfortunately, this defense was still no match for the strong poison of the magic item. It was quickly corroded and flaws appeared. Chapter 1729. Fan Qingmu only had time to let out a blood-curdling scream before a pitch-black qi emerged from his heart and rapidly spread to every part of his body. Following the emergence of this black qi, pieces of rotten flesh accompanied by a nauseating smell fell from Fan Qingmu's body. Fan Qingmu's corpse was still in a standing posture. When the pieces of flesh fell to the ground in a very strange manner, it did not take long for the pale white bones to be revealed. Highly toxic. Xiao Hua in the distance immediately narrowed his eyes and thought with a chill in his heart. He then looked at the door of the hall. Fan Qingmu is dead. His oppressive aura immediately disappeared. The group of Blue Li sect disciples immediately became lively. Their faces were filled with surprise. Many of them shouted, "Manor Master Hu, quickly open the array." In the hall, the only remaining disciple of Ling Pei Mountain Villa quietly put away the triangular flag. He stood up coldly and looked at the door of the hall. He was about to speak. At this moment, there was a schwa sound and the door of the hall opened. A black object was thrown in and landed on the table with a muffled dang. In the hall, the disciples were all cultivators. How could they not understand? That black object was none other than the head of Ling Pei Mountain Villa's Manor Master Hu. Manor Master Hu? Many disciples cried out in alarm. Their faces were filled with fear. Unlike the other disciples, the Ling Pei Mountain Villa's disciple had a cruel smile on his face. However, when he heard the voice outside the hall, an extremely shocked expression appeared on his face. Let me see how much effort Hu Ming has put in the past 10 years and how many disciples of the Lan Li sect he has won over. A sharp voice sounded. Although it sounded like a man's voice, there was a hint of femininity in the voice. Senior Uncle Ian. The voice was obviously very special. The disciples could immediately recognize it even when they were frightened. Following the shouts of the disciples, a dozen or so cultivators slowly walked in from the entrance of the hall. The one in front was an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. He wasn't very tall, but his body was short and his face was thin. However, his pale face was very strange. He didn't look like a normal cultivator who was full of vitality. Behind Martial Uncle Ian, there were a dozen or so disciples in the 11th layer of Qi refining. However, apart from the few in front who were acting normally, the rest of the disciples looked dispirited. They were obviously injured. Moreover, judging by their dejected expressions, they should be the disciples of Master Hu of Ling Pei Mountain Village. As expected, the disciple who had just stood up had a look of surprise on his face. He placed his hand in his bosom and stood there quietly, looking at Martial Uncle Ian. Martial Uncle Ian walked to the top of the hall and swept his gaze across the hall. After his gaze swept past the faces of Xiao Hua and the others, it stopped at a few disciples among the crowd. You all are really bold. You all know that I have a grudge with Hu Ming, yet you dared to hide it from me and join him. As soon as Martial Uncle Ian spoke, the disciples with pale faces and trembling bodies quickly stepped forward. With a plop, they knelt on the ground and shouted, Martial Uncle Ian, we didn't join Hu Ming. It was Hu Ming who said that there was a treasure today and invited us to come and try it out. We have absolutely no intention of betraying Martial Uncle Ian. Martial Uncle Ian sneered and said, if it was so simple, would I have scolded you all? If you all only had such selfish motives, why didn't you inform me? Why didn't you inform my direct disciple? Senior Uncle Ian sneered. A disciple boldly said, reporting to Martial Uncle, Hu Ming only said to keep it a secret. He didn't want us to tell anyone else. Senior Uncle Yin's expression didn't change. He waved his hand and a beam of light shot out. It seemed to be an enchanted item, but it also seemed to be a yellow talisman. The disciple sensed it, and his body twitched as if he wanted to resist. But Senior Uncle Yin's pressure completely suppressed him, making it impossible for him to move. A dark green light flashed, and a miserable scream rang out. The disciple's body also began to turn black, and pieces of rotting flesh began to fall from his body. The other disciples immediately shouted, "Martial Uncle, please spare us." You think you're the only one who knows? Since there are so many disciples gathered in the hall, how could you be the only one who knows? Martial Uncle Yin sneered at the skeleton that gradually appeared. Then he looked at the disciples who were kneeling on the ground with blood on their foreheads and said, "Since you knew, why did you do it in the first place? Back then, if any of you knew, you could have just sent me a message." "Martial Uncle, please spare us." The disciples immediately turned pale with fright. Knowing that there was no hope, they unconsciously began to resist. "Go kill them." Martial Uncle Yin waved his hand and ordered. At the same time, the pressure of the Foundation establishment stage pressed down. "Yes, we understand." Several disciples behind Senior Uncle Yin replied. Then, they clapped their hands and took out several yellow talismans. "What about Jianghu? What about the other disciples? Master, please give us your orders." When a few disciples walked a few steps forward, the fireball talismans in their hands shot out and landed on the bodies of those disciples. Several heart-wrenching screams sounded in everyone's ears, causing everyone's hearts to tremble in fear. A skinny disciple beside Martial Uncle Yin asked in a low voice. In an instant, everyone pricked up their ears and looked at Martial Uncle Yin with pitiful eyes. "The other disciples?" Martial Uncle Yin glanced at them coldly and said in a sharp voice, "They didn't swear a blood oath to be loyal to me. We'll make a blood oath right now." All the disciples shouted when they heard this. It seemed like they had found an opportunity to live. "Jianghu? There's no need for him to live." Martial Uncle Yin looked at the disciple who had been standing in front of the table and sneered, "How can I not know what he's thinking?" With that, Martial Uncle Yin raised his hand and flicked his middle finger. Seeing a green dot of light shoot out from Martial Uncle Yin's hand, Jianghu's expression changed greatly. He didn't dare to hesitate and immediately took out the scarlet triangular flag from before. Martial Uncle Yin was stunned when he saw the flag. An indescribable expression flashed through his eyes and his finger that was about to shoot out a second light unconsciously paused. Jianghu took out the small flag and didn't stop. He activated his magic power and a few strands of black light shot out from the small flag, shooting straight towards the walls of the hall. Uncle Yin's eyes were filled with interest as he watched the strands of black light land on the walls of the hall. He didn't raise his hand to stop them. As the black light landed on the walls of the hall, the black light flashed from the walls. As the light flickered, the restrictions in the hall weakened. Strands of black gas gradually squeezed out from the restrictions and quickly spread to cover the entire hall. "Quick now!" In the distance, Xiaohua shouted and slapped his hand. A strand of Samadhi True Fire appeared in his hand. Xiaohua waved his hand and the Samadhi True Fire appeared in his hand. With a palm strike, he slapped the nearest wall. The restriction on the wall had already been diluted by the black gas. After being burned by the Samadhi True Fire, a small hole had already appeared in the restriction. At this moment, the restrictions on the four walls were replaced by the old ones. Xiaohua's plan was indeed effective. "Go!" At this time, Qian Diheng also shouted. With a wave of his hand, his halberd immediately flew into the air. A tricolored brilliance emerged from the tip of the halberd, turning into 3 balls of light the size of a duck egg. They rushed towards the place where the Samadhi True Fire was burning. Rumble! With 3 loud explosions, a hole the size of a person was blasted out of the restriction on the wall. "I'll go first." Qian Diheng urged his spiritual power and didn't dare to hesitate. He flew towards the human-sized hole. Ming Hao was the first to fly out. Although Xiaohua was the closest to the wall, he didn't move. He just stared at Jianghu while his heart churned endlessly. Although he hadn't seen this scarlet triangular flag before, he wasn't unfamiliar with the black cheese restriction. It was very similar to the demonic formation he'd seen on the Thousand-Jiang Peak. Moreover, he could also see the difference within the churning black qi. This was clearly demonic qi. Demonic cultivator. Xiao Hua immediately judged it. However, looking at Qing Yu, he didn't seem to be possessed by the blood shadow. He was no different from an ordinary human cultivator. Suddenly, Xiao Hua frowned and thought of what Xiao Xinrui said that day. Heavenly Demon Sect? Is this disciple the Heavenly Demon Sect that senior sister mentioned? At the same time, Xiao Hua also diverted some attention to look at Martial Uncle Yin. The cloud-suppressing seal in his body was ready to attack at any time. However, Martial Uncle Yin didn't seem to see what Xiao Hua and the others were doing. He only looked at Qing Yu, as if Qing Yu, a disciple of Lingpei Mountain Villa at the 12th level of Qi refining, was more important than Xiao Hua and the other 4 disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Watch me! Seeing that after Qian Diheng had escaped, the black qi on the wall had become denser and denser, gradually covering up the whole, Kun Fian coldly shouted. The thunder-trapping bead in his hand also left his hand. Before the thunder-trapping bead flew to the wall, it had already enlarged to the size of a bowl. Countless tiny lightning bolts were released from the thunder-trapping bead, striking the black qi with a crackling sound. That lightning glow was indeed the nemesis of the black qi. Countless black qi was annihilated by the lightning glow. Instantly, another hole that was twice the size of the previous one appeared. I'm going, Kun Fian said coquettishly and flew into the hole. Ouch! At this moment, Qing Yu's attention was diverted from Martial Uncle Yin. Seeing that 2 of the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples had already escaped, he became anxious and spat out a mouthful of blood essence onto the small triangular flag. The small triangular flag flashed with black light, and even more black light with traces of blood flew out from the flag. It repeatedly shot into the 4 walls of the hall. Thus, even more dense black qi crazily surged out from the walls. In the blink of an eye, the hole that Kun Fian had escaped from was filled up. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.